BIA Superintendent Lester Sosi.
Testing.
Just a reminder to remove your hats and caps and to also to keep your side conversation at a minimal so we can have that respect for our presenters and our colleagues here of the 25th Navajo Nation Council. Mr. Sosi, you would have 20 minutes for your presentation.
Okay. Yat-e. I am Lester Sosi. I'm the Superintendent for Bureau of Indian Affairs Eastern Navajo Agency. Toha nenchlo na nishtej bashichin eshin da shichedo na kaide ne da shinale le lilke bethoda alkrai tohiskin de lile e arena shado ade shik ke hashte ade shmado shja ar ke hetina ta yis he kwagin khanda to so di khita Washington de Alabanda Anishi Nat up in it Nahan open Nachishin Idol Kito Lil. Washington Zongo so these and the ya on nay late and his what are your bits get all your bitsil. Atanil Sia what are how one must be yet a hashin Nata grass and nap and Nachi Hota than hit seal up and Nachi done hit seal on city case. A quiet is by Hins and Hota a pendan Haliai. Teacher Quaggy Arts on Ilchanahadit, Alti BIA will yada Ajo Dahikahe, show crew little show Quaggy, Nachito Sata, Aja, or also a Hotadishin song. I want to again introduce myself. I'm Lester Sosi. I'm the Superintendent for Eastern Navajo Agency. Cheryl Curley is also with us here in the chambers. Madam Speaker, Curley, honorable delegates, thank you very much for giving us some time to report out on the Bureau of Indian Affairs Navajo region as well as Eastern Navajo Agency. We appreciate the time and the partnership with the Navajo Nation, including Honorable President Nygrim, who was here yesterday providing his report out. We are certainly a partner to the Navajo Nation, and we work closely with all three branches of the government that's here, the Navajo Nation. On behalf of Regional Director Greg Mahuja, I'm here to provide the report. He had to be on travel today, so he's not able to be here this morning. Certainly, when we get the questions or if we don't provide the detailed information that you need, we're going to be writing down lots of notes so that we can respond properly, within the month after this discussion that we're going to have today. I want to, again, also mention that we did do a report. All the council members should have the BIA report. And we also had the hard copies of the report. We provided that about a week ago, as well as the soft copy of the report. Please, at your leisure, go through the report. There's a lot of good information, highlights and accomplishments for our staff members across the agencies for the Navajo region. You'll see in there details of the work that's being done. I want to highlight a couple of areas from the report. You'll see I think halfway through the report, some pictures of the wonderful work that's being done by our transportation department. And there's some pictures of before and after. And we really do depend on our transportation team members out there in the different agencies to work with the local chapters as well as leadership at the local level, honorable delegates, and then other executive leadership positions and Navajo Nation Division of Transportation to address all the issues that come up during inclement weather or on an emergency basis. So please look through those pictures and see that we were doing a lot of good work at the local agency level. I want to also highlight some good news and good information for the council. Our regional director Mahoja has been appointed to the New Mexico Tribal Infrastructure Board. So that is, at least on the New Mexico side, he'll be able to directly advocate and provide support to Navajo chapters that submit requests and proposals to the state of New Mexico on the state of New Mexico side. He also has been appointed to the Glen Canyon Dam Adaptive Management Working Group for Colorado. So he'll also be involved directly and significantly in advocating for Navajo region and Navajo Nation related concerns that come up, as well as his expertise there. We have also been working very hard from the Navajo region to support all broadband initiatives and projects that have been working through the system. And so we will remain committed to working on those broadband initiatives and projects. As we all know, the COVID-19 has really revealed some of the challenges that we have, broadband being one of them. But we are committed and we stand by to process any proposals that come to our Navajo region as well as to the Eastern Navajo Agency. Next week, our Navajo region will be providing a presentation on the Tribal Interior Budget Council process at Far Rock Casino. That's on July 25th. We had some questions that came to us about how does that process work and who's all a part of that process. So we'll be making a presentation from the Navajo region on that. We also want to give a brief update on our Feed a Trust work that we're doing. In Eastern Navajo Agency, we have 3 applications that we are working with White Horse Lake chapter and Theroux chapters on the Feed a Trust process. And that does entail some significant work and time, but we're working hard with the 3 chapters. We certainly will then be working with central government on the central government process when it's submitted to that. Also want to indicate that the carbon credit sequestration program has been greenlit by central office, which could potentially result in millions of dollars of income for the Navajo Nation. My understanding that there's been lots of discussions on that with key officials and committees, and right now my understanding is that the scope of work had to be updated to include that opportunity, and I believe it's with the Navajo Nation Forestry Department on that. Some of the other things that I think that is important to note is just a lot of the work that we're doing in our realty department on rights-of-ways, and that's something that I'm also involved a lot in the Eastern Navajo Agency side, really understanding the process of what that is and working with the applicants as well as the chapters. There's lots of discussions and work that's happening with that. So our team is ready to help not only providing education on the rights-of-way process under 25 CFR 169, but also providing guidance and technical guidance, follow-up, and closeout of those projects. We do realize that the ARPA funding has some deadlines coming up soon, and we want to be ready, and we are ready. Our teams are ready to jump on those proposals once they come to our Navajo region, as well as the agency realty offices, including Eastern Navajo Agency. So those would be my highlights that I want to mention. Some of it are included in our report, but others are just current information I wanted to provide. So yesterday I was listening in on some of the discussions. I know there's conversations and discussions around grazing permits, transportation, road maintenance, and even administrative area work, as well as some cleanup questions that came up. We are listening to a lot of these discussions. Our experts are listening, and they are taking notes on it. So we'll be able to provide detailed information and written formats too. So, Honorable Speaker, that would be the highlights of what we want to present this morning. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Superintendent Sosi, for your report this morning. Colleagues, do we have a motion on the floor? Motion by Vice Chair Johnson, second by Delegate Tol. Colleagues, do we have any questions on the floor for our presenter this morning? We will go first with Chair Eugenia Charles Newton.
Thank you, Speaker, and also thank you, BIA, for the report. I do have just one question. In terms of the tally count, what is the process for getting that changed? Or, what is the push to try to address the tally counts here on the Navajo Nation? I reserve my time, Speaker.
Reserve time of 4:42. Delegate Autoso.
Good morning. I've been one area that just wanted to ask is that based off of the federal deficit or the debt ceiling that was passed Congress, how does that decision how does that decision impact your office in tribal as the Bureau of Indian Affairs job as our trustee, the debt ceiling that was passed by Congress? How will that impact your office of trustees, another governmental office that is housed at Gallup BIA, and how will those impacts indirectly impact Navajo services, which your responsibility as our trustee? And with that, if you can, those impacts, please provide us timelines and so forth, because the debt ceiling is tied to federal dollars, restrictions, and so forth. When will it impact the Navajo Nation? Yeah, reserve my time.
Reserve time of 3:50. Adokunenana Shiaj. Delegate Herman Daniels.
Madam Speaker, I don't know 25th Navajo Nation Council. I don't know I see about Henson, what about Heta needs and what citizen, Nakabeha, what Zito, Nana, Quado, Senegin, Handest, Anigi. I see by Henson, Quado, Honorable Rexley Jim, Quado, thank you very much, Quado. I don't know Quado, Niklas Reda Bia Edo Chanel, Mr. Sosi, Quado, Quado, we are shouting night, the dish, Quado, Nagata, Arunana, the Quilshi has on the Quado, the Gatsake, Yaquado, Nagata, not source behind the chi, 8 grazing permits. Nagata, Yake Apacago, there's Navajo partition land. Within my area and other areas, the delegates like the region areas in PL beat the Halong. So AD key quidon a gate at the Queen Yan not source Mahal Chigi do Ilon Dalia. AD key quido the 23rd RDC a quido not so spedana I lastly to reissue grazing permits, Quidonagay, 10 sheep units. Arunana Quidonagay, the last 24th RDC Ecuador 50 sheep units. What are Ecuador Yeniado Ecuador Belana Slin Ecuador? Eco Elahagi Tahwell, Zishlan Soya, Quidonagay, laden has added the ne. Kada Sila, Stuido Sani, not does Leko, not so Mahalachi. Shando, Gate, Lonana, Quado, Shanani, and Shido, Letrodans and Ho. A coco, Quado, Hagilata, Whale, Gislan, so, Ilabat Hunt, Alonso, Quado. I know from my area, what integrate at Quishy permits a gate or Ilon, Daliaco, and the Quado A, Nehigi, Quado, the permit holders, and Liniki, A Quado, nakan hitch honda to al nilta no kodo e yesu hadatsi arona another area e ya kodo dan teen kodo na gay da wis ago na gay dam throughout the Navajo Nation aya ben dasti kodo kal ko e hol juste arona na kodo zada khait ada akhishin da deal nish kodo na gay dam with the end thought to address some of these roads kodo na gay like some areas na gay Western Agency jo I see that sake at according to chapters, heavy equipment banta has need that oh you get it or you done so than graders that air on front end loaders that I see but cut the need eat hala ajo cut don't can that you know that can so the whole small so do ako arona na kodo na gaita nana e ya na gaita beshna pala windmills at that I see kodo them I can that deal na kodo na gaita Navajo Nation Water Resources Ajadam, da initially Ecuador the hand so the Ecuador a kitchen that deal in the shed son he got a dosh what could also say oh papa says case or sat that did and Lena has ante ye got that desk got Tod Nedge had it Nedge to had tra Aronald lost such a to had tra or a throw better has to ho did sit an argon that had washing the whole dust stain ho in Western JIC to halken halnako AIC in hedge ehon chketos I see that they still chele that state ho nana chele choda dal sena halnako ko ide yato ba des sito na ko ta pa na ide kiro le ko Madam Speaker reserve time ide shlikida
Ikihachiya's reserve time of 101. Ado kodo shitsilin but not the deshal. Council Delegate Dr. Andy Ness.
Oh, yeah, should speaker, Ado Mr. Yazia, so yeah, Ado Aden Chanela, yeah, and so does indoors and Behdins Adi Benebi, yeah, and Hidini Dolis. Two questions. The timeline that we can expect regarding the Blue Canyon Dam and Sand Gravel Pit project, the timeline related to the project information and the consent use of the right-of-way. The timeline the Department of Interior from Secretary Holland's office of what we can expect here on Navajo, respectively to our Navajo area office related to projects or anything that we should be informing many of our constituents or be informed of from the Navajo area office coming from Madam Secretary Holland's office. Those are my two pertinent questions at this time. Speaker, I reserve my time.
Reserve time 403. Ado Kodoshi Che Nana, Council Delegate George Toll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do not aninitlenin kodo do yat epen do yat oshi nadan his kadon hikala ste Madam Chair do staff do juno hato dezing do hatli hota na halla tsablia chakande isto isyan hita doslis nes agi dasabandol our former leader conjonos Tarzan yeha zito pa koni zinchito lilko hota e nahaha otzi leko only certain individual always does that so hota hathalitan lenigi po to yeselni hala e yahain lebet ata in ha tsatatol zendos sun yehatat is disjidi hota ibikayika so we should never forget about our medicine man even the church ajunaltos Bible dahino aishinto pahuito al kunsadadol zingilto ishi hota speaker ninshkero lit anyway Mr. Sosi, good morning, and again, glad to see you. I tend to be in your office, but I'm always traveling around my community. So someday we will sit down. The only issue I have is the right-of-way towards Bentata, Torreon. Some fences are down right-of-way fence that needs to be fixed. and also the cattle guard. The other issue that we people run into is the allotted land home site residential lease or allotted land of Kaigi. They're doing a project within each chapter and they run into problems in Josani in Nithan also at Saik is a Tahagi e ko e Bishadla or Lito home site lease. Ako idea anha ado si yego kenas on Heinz and list because there's a lot of projects that the community are working on, such as bathroom, telephone, and all that in 2080. Additionally, the Eastern Land Board Commissioner, not Commissioner, but Land Board and Lenigito Oyo. Ashin salts a kato lato the bebes an ishin resource pedate eco ilto hot and leko zonan tindo zo bitcha zoshi ye ya he yinda aro listen do ya ko ato I yakit so I just go ahead and weigh my time and thank you.
Delegate Toth waives his time. Rokunenhana Vice Chair Carl Slater.
Thank you very much, Speaker. Good morning, colleagues, and good morning, Mr. Sosi. I just have one brief request right now. I brought it up yesterday during the President's address, and that is we have a road 8009 in Rock Point, and it's a BIA road that NDOT has maintained and done some improvement work on in the past, but it intersects with US 191 and we're having severe drainage issues. We also have another road 8070 which heads out more on the west and the south of US 191, and we've had a lot of issues with accumulation of blow sand on that road and the maintenance of it, and it'd be ideal if we can get to the extent that the BIA road maintenance can help us out with removal and potentially placing any millings that you have from other projects or any other like sister agencies that could help you out. There's some funds that NDOT's identified for improvement, and we're still trying to get them to procure that project or transfer the funding over to Apache County. But those are two roads that we've had a lot of issues on recently, just with how dry things have been. And so if there's an opportunity to apply some millings to do some minor maintenance improvements on those two, that's what we need. For 8009, that's gonna be a larger conversation with ADOT, and I guess I would anticipate that NDOT will be inviting you to the table and the President as well for how we can interface with them. Speaker, I'll reserve my time.
Reserve time of 3:23. Rokunenhana Shiaj, Delegate Arvizo.
Yatehpen, Madam Speaker, 25th Navajo Nation Council. Mr. Sosi, good morning. I just have a question on the 2025 renewal of the grazing permittees. The Saho Nke communities, they're not feasible for grazing, and I'm wondering what the plan is. On some of these communities, I see the whole take. I mean, we're in dire need of rain and moisture and whatnot. Tumbleweeds, done sick. Nobody wants to eat that, not even the goats. So, and I'm wondering, halet bin dashnish, because in some of my areas, there's a lot of people that are wanting grazing permits, and I know we can't, and I know there's going to be they're going to be disappointed because they're not going to get approved for these grazing permits. So I'm just wondering what your office is doing and how we're gonna accommodate some folks. And I know a lot of it is down to the plans that you guys ask for. Halit Adayurji. It's not a comprehensive plan, but conservation plan. Ancient Eben Nachi. But I'm just kind of worried about as many people trying to apply for it, and then we have, in some cases, we have small areas, and then there's other cases where grazing is just not feasible at all. Madam Speaker, reserve my time.
Reserve time of 3:01. Nana, we have Council Delegate Lamardo Ezeret.
Yat Eben, do Shehe, Madam Speaker. Good morning. Do Mr. Sosi Yate here, do Kwaina Sot Kani Beshmas an here in Kitishnida, do Yat Eben, do Sashi Rex Lee Jem Chinantani, here, citizen Jano Inla, here in Kitishnida. Quite ya, Anna Kyo dish, not dish kita. Why a team a bandade Nishoya in that Edo die Apache County Edo die different entities that want to work on BIA roads. We're having lots of problems getting okays to work on these roads. How can you guys make it easier? We should be able to say team rather than go and fight BIA to just grade or fix a road. There's got to be something that you guys can do, especially if it's school road. I said there were some roads back there in south of Hauk Dita Teheya, Sochin Eli. We're having problems getting those fixed. So it's got to be something that you guys can come up with and say, well, it's okay, just go for it. Whoever needs to fix it, just don't need it, but we're having a lot of problems on that type of stuff. It's not only at the south side of I-40, Klagito, the White Runes, that ABIA roads, can't even do anything with them. So Asia Bandini Tratos, maybe you can let us know on some of that stuff. Ado a team by Yana Tiegi, these paved roads, I guess when the kata hasado, there's big holes and Lego shitna olo dita curly but now sisne ita club case lo wata but biketi tra I said ba it's unsafe. Not only that road, road 12, there's a lot of roads that way. After a couple of weeks later, I want to thank NDOT, they were out there fixing those roads. You know, if we can do that and say, well, anybody can fix those roads, you should be able to do that, because of safety. I'll call NDOT ba. Mr. Silversmith, Adonan windmills couldn't be on not supposed to be car. What is the process? How is the process? Well, no, we're getting a lot of people in my area. My area is Klagito, Hauk, White Runes, Natatzi, those areas, and Lupton and Hauk, the windmills in the house. Those up there, those fans, fins, they're just laying around and people don't know where to call. They were thinking social, Navajo Nation government, natural resource. I don't know, now you're saying here that you're fixing them, Called Halit out Tela to Hatila Halit out Jishni. So, and mainly new lands, they're basically still under O'Neill. So I don't know how that's going to work. Thank you. I'll waive my time.
Delegate Azeret waives his time. Ado kuna epanaho de shal. Council Delegate Nathan Nota.
Yate Pina, Speaker Curley, good morning, Yate, and thank you for this time. Ado Lester Sosi, BIA Superintendent, good morning, Yate Pina. I just have a couple of questions. One is related to the uranium tailings cleanup over in the most southeastern part of my district in Coyote Canyon. I'm wondering, on the hauling routes, what role is BIA playing in getting those tailings transferred from the Cuvera mines to the Red Rock disposal facility? Although I would like to request from BIA a continued update to me regarding what's taking place, because like I said, the farthest southeastern district, or part of my district, is part of that cleanup, and they're really hounding on me, and I need to keep up with those updates. So Ashwanda, if you could keep me updated, I would appreciate it. Saigi yaha on July the 28th at 9 a.m. I did request from BIA. I sent a letter to the area director himself. We have a road transportation meeting with NDOT, BIA, and then the two counties, San Juan County, New Mexico, and McKinley County. So we set up this roads meeting to cover a lot of these issues that we're dealing with in terms of just maintenance of that. This will be at the Tohatchee Chapter House on May the 28th at 9 a.m. I would like the area director to send those representatives from the transportation branch of BIA to that meeting. And I would like some concurrence on that. I haven't received any information from the area director, so maybe if he could concur that information with me, I would appreciate it. I reserve my time.
Reserve time at 2:56. At this time, I'd like to give the floor back over to Mr. Sosi for your responses. Next, after responses, we'll have Honorable Helena Nesbegay and Chair Brenda Jesus, and also Council Delegate Simpson. Mr. Sosi, your responses?
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Again, thank you very much, honorable delegates, for asking those very good questions on some of the operations and work that we do from the Bureau of Indian Affairs. I want to re-emphasize again, we are a partner to the Navajo Nation. We will continue to be your partner in addressing the needs of the tribal communities out there. The Navajo Nation is, of course, a big nation, and it covers 3 different states. And keep in mind that as we work through these different areas of work, there are multiple jurisdictions, different laws, different regulations that we have to use. From the Bureau of Indian Affairs, we have to wear many hats, and we also we expect our team members to know about these different laws and regulations, so they certainly do know their work and the jobs that they do. The first question that came from the Honorable Charles Noon, you were asking about tally count, what the process is, and how might that be changed. I want to, I guess, cite the Navajo regulations under the Code of Federal Regulations. That's cited as Navajo regulations. It's 25 CFR 167.7. So that is where it explains that records have to be kept for livestock tallies. And so in here, it says under Part C, the superintendent shall prepare and keep current a register containing the names of all permittees using the range, the number of each class of stock by age classes, graze annually, and the periods during which grazing shall be permitted, and each part thereof. An annual stock census, which is a tally, will be taken to ensure that the carrying capacity is not exceeded. So that is where the guide is for tally counts, and it is part of the regulations, And normally, I don't mean to insult anybody's intelligence here, but of course the regulations are based on law that's built by Congress. So to make any change, usually the process will be at the congressional level to make those changes. We have to abide by the regulations, and that's where it comes from. An annual tally count has to happen. We do work closely with the land board, and I know on the Big Navajo side, grazing officials work with our team members to do those tally counts. So hopefully that answers your question, Honorable Delegate. The next question came from Honorable Delegate Oto So. As we, I think, all heard on the news, a lot of discussion happened on the debt ceiling. And I think that at the national level, at the U.S. federal government level, there was lots of conversations on how do we address the debt ceiling. So those discussions happened and resulted in some key decisions and a law, I think, that was built working with the president, and that was basically passed. So in that, it does lift, I think, extends the date and working through the debt that the United States government basically has to work through. Now, how does that impact, let's say, at our local Navajo region? Well, the funding that we get is really based on the 3-year budget cycle that happens with the federal government. So those funds have already been basically addressed, allocated, and worked through. As we all know, and I think under the Interior Tribal Budget Council, they talk a lot about that, the 3-year budget cycle. So as the rolling budget cycle goes on at those different years, we do get the funding for our programs. So far we have not got any indication that because of the debt ceiling that will be reduced. So I believe that right now we should be okay in our program funding. But again, no promises there. You know, it's really up to Congress and the president how they work the final phases of the budget cycle work that they do. Thank you. I think the next question came from Honorable Herman Daniels. Thank you again for the questions that you have there, a couple areas. And you talked about the Red Book and it related to the grazing permits, especially in the Navajo partition land. I just want to add a little bit on the grazing permits. We do know that that is a very sensitive area of work. We do know also that it does impact families across the Navajo Nation. We also know there are different regulations to address those different areas of aspects of the grazing permitting process. On the Eastern Navajo Agency side, we use 25 CFR 166 and 167. The 166 is broad in nature across Indian country that all 12 BIA regions use. The 167 was developed specifically for Navajo grazing regulations. So we have to consistently use both regulations to do that. It is also true, as you state, Honorable Daniels, that the 23rd Resources and Development Committee has worked through and worked through some of the process on reissuing those grazing permits in NPL and other areas where I think the one of the references or the metric was the 10 sheep units and possibly the 50 sheep unit that was discussed a few years back. So kind of putting it in context, we have been working with the Resources and Development Committee in addressing grazing permit for the whole Navajo Nation. We made some presentation to the RDC. I appreciate Madam Chair Jesus' leadership on that. What we have basically come to an understanding is that they ask us, BIA, what is some of your recommendations that you can come up with addressing those non-issue permits on the Big Navajo side. And so we had some very good discussions on that. And based on that meeting we had with RDC decided to also facilitate, if I'm not mistaken, I believe that there's going to be a 2-day work session with a 2-day work session on looking at overall grazing permits for the Navajo Nation. So I believe, Honorable Daniels, that will be part of the conversation that we will be engaged in when we meet with RDC, and I'm sure other people will also be attending that work session. And so we'll address all those technical issues and concerns that come up. What RDC asked us really was, BIA, do you guys have some proposals, some recommendation, some innovative ways to look at these challenges that are across the Navajo Nation? So we, based on that guidance from RDC internally, BIA, we are going to do an internal 2-day work session with our subject matter experts. And we're going to come together and review all those challenges that we see out there, and then be able to come up with some recommendations from Bureau of Indian Affairs. We will then present this at the 2-day RDC work sessions. So hopefully many of you might be able to attend that work session and provide your recommendations and guidance. So that is a kind of a path forward on addressing grazing permits. Your second question, Honorable Delegates, was about the challenges about road maintenance work that's out there. You indicated that chapters have some heavy equipment also, and that's certainly the dry area out there right now across the Navajo Nation. Again, roads is certainly a very big area of work that we do. And I think I'll give you an example from Eastern Navajo Agency and how we're doing road maintenance. And that certainly could be a model. Because on Eastern side, we have the added challenge of mixed jurisdiction. And so we have to involve the state. We have to involve the county. And our team has worked very hard from the Navajo region side and working with Eastern also to develop county agreements. So these county agreements are in place. And depending on the area or the location, yeah, some counties are very proactive in working with not only BIA but also NDOT, which is great because we're able to marshal the resources to tackle some of those road maintenance issues. For Eastern side, we've been very fortunate under Honorable Delegate Simpson's leadership. We work on some community road challenges at Ohoncino and all the way Ohoncino and Naizi area. And we developed a nice plan on that side. What we did was that we came together several meetings, technical work sessions, and identified short-term challenges and coming up with short-term solutions as well as long-term solutions. Some of the short-term was to immediately address some of those like sand pits or some impacts from the winter moisture, and some of those erosions happen. What we did in the last month or so from Eastern was we replaced some of those culverts out there and also really maintain some of those impacted areas of the roads in Ohoncino and then Naizi area. We still have much work to do in that group because we're going to be looking at rights-of-ways. How do we get the rights-of-ways in place so we can do long-term work on those? One of the bright spots from that coming together meeting was that NDOT let us know that they've identified $6 million for part of an not Ohoncino, but a Naizi to Pueblo Montana road. So they've got that on their plans and they got the funding to do that. So we're really excited that that funding is coming through, and right now we're just working with them if they need our help and possibly rights of ways and other issues there. So I think that road work is still a very complicated, sometimes very challenging area. However, I think our team members are very aware. Our team at HOSE has been in a lot of those conversations with different counties and different entities that come together. We'll have to continue to do that. Honorable Daniels, we certainly welcome your guidance from council leadership on how we can maybe improve on those discussions and coordination that has to happen. The next one came from Honorable Dr. Andy Naz. Thank you for a couple questions you have there. On the Blue Canyon gravel pit and right-of-way consent, Unfortunately, I don't have a direct answer for you, but what I'll do is I'll follow with our team members and the regional director to get a written response, and Cheryl is taking notes on that, so we'll submit a written response to you on that, sir. The second question you had was any updates on Navajo region area projects from DOI central office. I believe RD Mahoja has been updating different delegates on a lot of these projects, and so we'll be working, continue to work and provide that. But if you do have a specific area or project that you need update on, please don't hesitate to send us an email, and we'll respond and give you the details of those different project status. The next delegate, Honorable Delegate Toth, thank you again for the 3 questions that you provided related to some of the fence being down, some cattle work on the rights-of-ways between Pueblo Pintada and Torreon. My team has really been responding, and I'll remind them on it too. What we've done, for example, was that there's several areas where that some access points to these roads, the cattle guards are not being used. So we have removed those and closed off those areas so that we can reuse some of those, because those cattle guards are expensive. The wider ones cost about $30,000 to implement and install those cattle guards. But we have been doing some cattle guard cleaning. They do go across the eastern side with different chapters, including Alamo and Hojile. So we'll continue to do that. And I've been trying to make it a practice from my side, superintendent, so to copy those delegates where we do those works that we do. I always tell my team, give us some before pictures and after pictures, and I try to share that with you delegates on that. We'll continue to work on that. The second question related to allotment lands. We are hearing and learning that some of these ARPA fund proposals are going to support some of those homes that are on allotment lands as called tribal trust land. Our realty office has really been engaged on those conversations with the land department and other offices from the Navajo Nation. And really, we're on top of that. But if you have a specific concern on any one of those, let us know. I have my meetings with my realty staff on almost on a weekly basis to address those. I remind them that ARPA is very, very important, very critical. And I also remind them that let's really do what we can to help them, not be bureaucratic in response. What are some ways to look at that? One of the things I want to relate to the council here is this. If you have some guide or influence to your enterprises, please listen to my example here. There was a situation in Standing Rock where an individual was waiting for a power line, service line drop. The gentleman has a home that's only about 25 feet away from the main power line. The main power line has a right-of-way. So all that person needs is a service line drop. And the Navajo enterprise that provides that utility service is the one that oversees that. And I made it known to leadership on that side that you just need to do an SLA, a service line agreement. You don't need a right-of-way. So the gentleman said, okay, I'll take it back to my team. A month later, I asked him, what's the status on that? Oh, it's part of a right-of-way process that we're doing for that community. It's what I was told. I said, no, please. It's a service line drop. You don't need to have a right-of-way, and you don't need BIA's permission. You just drop that line from that right-of-way that electrical line that already has a right-of-way. Just drop it. It's only 25 feet away. So anyway, I just want to give you a very on-the-ground example that we try hard to also provide guidance to these different entities that we work with. A lot of these ARPA-related projects are in those situations. So whether it be electrical, whether it be water line, in the provisions of the regulations, there's a whole provision about service line agreement. So we continue to remind these different utility companies on that. I just wanted to share that with you. That service line drop could be done overnight, just to let you know. Thank you. The other one, the last question, Honorable Toth, is about land board. You are correct. There seems to be some disagreements with the different team members of the land board. We still engage all the land board members respectfully, and we try hard to recommend certain, based on the regulations, how we can continue to work on those grazing permits. We'll keep doing that, Honorable Toth. The next question came from Vice Chair Carl Slater. More of a request to our region for Road 8009 and 8070. We certainly take your request, and what we could do is provide a written response to your request on that, the status of it, and how we can continue to collaborate on that. You indicated there might be some drainage issues on some of those roads, as well as maybe sand accumulation. We do work on those types of road maintenance issues. I know that for eastern side, there's an area on the road that goes between Crown Point and Farmington. There's a huge sand dune that has come across, but we were able to move the sand back out so that it doesn't impact the road. So we can certainly do that, and we'll provide a response on that. And we'll work on continue to provide minor road maintenance, especially on those roads that are designated as BIA roads in the inventory system. Thank you. Honorable Delegate Arvizo, you had some questions on grazing permits as it relates to the 2025. And I am so glad you're bringing that up, Honorable Delegate, because I believe this is an opportunity for all the council to understand, at least in the eastern side, some of the process that we use and the challenges that we're working through in terms of grazing. The drought has really impacted the area, as we all know. We also know there's feral horse out there. That's also an issue that I think we need to work together from the Navajo Nation side and us to address those issues, because that's also impacting the forage. So there's some tough decisions maybe that we have to make and work on it. But more specifically on 2025, what we've done from Eastern Navajo agencies, I worked with my team. We developed a 2025 action plan. And we have implemented that action plan for the grazing renewal project we'll be doing. And one of those aspects of working on that is doing inventory studies. We're going to complete those inventory studies, which probably will tell us that there's not a lot of forage out there. So then that inventory studies will be used to establish the carrying capacities out there. And I wouldn't be surprised much of those areas, the carrying capacity is going to go down. And yes, people will be very concerned, perhaps upset over that. And that is a challenging area of work that we're going to have to continue to work with the land board, because the land board has a very big role in also explaining the situation out there, as well as being a representative, elected representative for the Navajo Nation, to make sure that the land is protected and preserved. So we do have an action plan, and we'll be going out to about 10 areas in eastern side next year to explain the process, the requirements, the conservation plans. And then one other thing I want to relate to the council here is that those land use plans at the chapter level should really take into consideration grazing. You see some of those plans that don't include that. So you have kind of like these home site leases popping up all areas. So it's very challenging from a grazing administrative perspective to try to maintain those grazable areas. That's one of the challenges that we're working through, especially in District 16 area, as in your area, sir. So we'll continue to do that. We can meet with you at your leisure if you want to, and we can provide more details on that. But thank you for bringing up that question. The last question that I heard and actually a couple more. One more is from Honorable Ezeret. I need to learn how to properly say your name, sir. Ezeret, I think that's how you say it. Yes, again, related to working together on the roads, we'll do that, and I kind of mentioned that when I was responding to Honorable Delegate Toth, what we did in Oho area as well as Naizi area. So we need to continue to work together. That's an area that we need each other to work closely together, Navajo Nation, NDOT, and us. And we'll continue to do that. Some examples of some really good cooperation that we do is on the winter plan during the winter season as well as the monsoon season. I think that in general, usually when there's an emergency situation, we will respond from the BIA. And then we come back and make sure that if there's any environmental issues that came up during that response, we address those issues. And we also work on trying to continue these cooperative agreements with county governments so that we are all in sync and addresses some of those areas. In many times we work with NDOT. NDOT might work in one chapter area and we work on the other areas. So those types of coordination are always ongoing. But thank you very much for raising your concerns. And if you have a specific concern, also let us know. We will also take notes on Route 12 that you mentioned, and we'll work on our team to respond, to give a written response on that part. The second part of your question about windmills, I would have to, we'll give you a written response on that. I don't have a direct answer for you at this time, sir. But thank you very much to all the questions. Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Sosi, Superintendent, for your responses. Colleagues, this is a brief announcement. We do have change labs on the north side. Christine Laughter, who also provided us continental breakfast this morning, so please welcome them to the chambers. And for our audiences too, we are wearing yellow just to have awareness on UV, that's Ultraviolet Safety Awareness Month. I know it is hot outside and continue to tell our people about how to protect ourselves from the sun and to avoid skin cancer, and just wearing your hats and sunglasses when you get out in the heat, and also continue to stay hydrated with sunscreen. Just for that little announcement. Colleagues, I'm going to return back the floor for more questions and comments. First, we have Delegate Helena Nesbegay.
Okay, good morning, Mr. Soksi. I have a question on RMU. When they withdraw the land and they know that there's people that are living on the land there and they're not family members, it's a big issue that I'm encountering in one of my delegate region. And they're just giving those families just a three-quarter of an acre of our home site to where it's in a rural area to where it should have been a 1 acre land. Of course, that's a big concern to about 3 families, and these families were residing there already when they started doing the MRU. So that's what I want to know, and that's what my question is. I have several cleanup that BIA needs to do in Kaibito, Tanalia, that they left some buildings still up and it's just being vandalized and not looking good in my community. So I want to address that again. Other road maintenance, I know you guys sometimes grade the roads, but maybe if there's a water truck or wetting it down because of the drought, because even if you grade it with that dry dirt, it's not going to, even especially where we live at, the sand is a major problem in the summer. It gets really sandy. So those are my 3 questions. And then on the grazing permit, I have some people that are living in NPL, and I have a gentleman that keep asking that their permit was collected years back, and now both parents are gone, and he wants to know what he can do with it, or if he can get that back, because nothing was done about it. My understanding is that, it wasn't really officially presented to him, but he was to his dad, and his parents gave it to him, but nothing was really done about it. So it's not just one family that asked me that question. So I guess they've been waiting for so long. So those are my questions, and thank you. Back to you, Madam Speaker.
Delegate Helena Nesbigay. Next in queue, we have Chair Brenda Jesus.
Yat Bina, Madam Speaker, Ado Inda, Yat Bina, colleagues of the 25th Navajo Nation Council. Ado Hiahat Shanat Ani, Mr. Lester Sosi, for giving this presentation on behalf of your boss, Mr. Mahoja, Ado Inda Cheryl. Thank you for being here as well. So I know that we've been having collective dialogue in regard to the mounds of issues regarding grazing permits, Mr. Sosi. One area that I wanted to ask was, I know that in the Eastern Navajo side, we do have that checkerboard land status, and there are some fee lands that the Navajo Nation currently pays property taxes on. And I know that also that Navajo Nation Land Department has to pay grazing fees to the county on the fee lands where a lot of our constituents are grazing. So I was just curious. I know that at one point, a lot of our constituents that were grazing on fee land with grazing permits were paying BIA, but I know that there was a discussion with Ms. Delmar and yourself if that is the regular due process, and I'm not too sure if Department of Agriculture has taken the lead in trying to craft how the grazing fees are going to be collected for permit holders on fee land in the Eastern Navajo area. Although the other area is with these current drought conditions right now with our grazing permit holders. I know that some of our grazing permit holders go through USDA, through Farm Services Agency for emergency assistance, but is there other assistance like from the IIM account, through the Bureau that our permittees can be assisted in some way? So that's my second question. And my third question is, there are a lot of issues around grazing permits in regards to probate. Some of these probates you've just mentioned are actually outstanding, going on 30, 40 years, 20 years. I don't know if this is where education needs to come in, to where maybe now we need to really start emphasizing to our permit holders to probably start putting wills in place. I don't know if that has been promoted or educated to our grazing permit holders, but right now I do have a lot of constituents that are in probate with their grazing permit. So again, I just like to have BIA expound on some alternative options on that. So those would be my three questions, and I'd like to go ahead and reserve my time, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
Reserve time of 2:09. Next, we have Council Delegate Danny Simpson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, though, members of the 25th Council. Mr. Sos, thank you for your report. I appreciate that. I think I have a few questions here. In reference to the Resource Management Plan amendment that BLM BIA is working with and with certain tribes, I believe that the Office of the President, Vice President really needs to be educated on this Resource Management Plan amendment. I know Resource and Development Committee has been attending these meetings, but I think it's a big issue because this has been in the works since 2013. And I believe that with the new administration, to consider if this will work well for the Navajo Nation, especially within the Eastern Agency, because this resource management plan pertains to Eastern Agency under the Farmington Field Office of BLM. So again, I think we had to continue to work with Navajo Nation very closely, because it seems like more of this, what's being discussed is to do away with the 106 review and go towards the programmatic review process. And I think it takes a lot of authority away from the Navajo Nation and their how to go about any development within the Eastern Agency. So please let us please have BIA and BLM work, because BLM is your sister agency, and make sure that's conveyed to your sister agency. Then it goes back to residential lease. Residential lease, what's delaying the process of approving these residential leases? I know some interest to these allotment lands can be over 500, but then some only have maybe 10 interest holders to these allotment land, but still it seems like it's continued to take a long time to approve these residential leases. I know you've been working on it, but I know the archaeological report has to be submitted to the historical preservation to get the cultural resource compliance. Are they the problem? And also, then after everything's completed, it has to go to the Fish and Wildlife. Is that taking a long time to get the biological compliance? So we need to find out why it takes a long time to get a residential lease approved for our Navajo people, because right now we're pushing it to get them power line and water line. So we need to somewhat expedite their approval on the residential lease side. If the Navajo Nation side is the problem with these with these compliance forms, please let us know, resource and development, so we can address that to make sure these compliance forms go out as soon as possible so you can approve these residential leases. Then another issue that's coming up is also about Eastern Agency versus the Big Navajo on raising to grazing fees. Why does Eastern Agency have to pay grazing fee and Big Navajo doesn't pay grazing fee for their grazing permits and all that? So is it Navajo Nation's authority to make those changes? Please let us know, and so the council can know and how we can go about that, because I think we always hear it every day from Eastern delegates. Why is Eastern Agency permittees paying grazing fee? So is it where the main laws within Navajo Nation to where every grazing permittee pays grazing fees? Bonding, another issue on the grazing permit renewals. On that, I think the delegates need to be educated, because it's forthcoming that where bonding will be required for all grazing renewal. So I think that's what needs to be. And what is bonding? I think the delegates need to know about on the bonding. Also, it's kind of disturbing. I don't have 47 minutes. It's kind of disturbing. Now, any development, as you know, we're a checkerboard area within the Eastern Agency, and if we don't get power line, water line, roads, or anything within our communities, especially to our Navajo people, to get water line, power line to them, and if it has to cross BLM, Bureau of Land Management Lands, we have to consult with other tribes on BLM. So if they have ties, saying that they have ties to this area on public domain, they can stop the whole project. So somewhere we have to work with BLM, your sister agency, to address that. Because right now, like I said, we just have a few months to spend ARPA.
Time. Delegate Simpson. Next, we'll go to Vice Chair Simonson.
Yeah, Speaker Curley, and good morning, honorable members of the 25th Navajo Nation Council. Although, thank you with your report from BIA. Good morning and welcome to the chambers. My concerns for our area certainly are grazing permits, reissuance. It's been ongoing for years, and I know with NPL area, Phase 1 was completed. We're now looking at Phase 2 and Phase 3, and of course, RDC 2 years ago increased the sheep units to 50, but it remains at 10. And so a lot of it is because of the forage study. And I'm reading through your report that is scheduled to happen. Am I reading that correct? In August? But you can answer that after you come back. So it sounds like it's scheduled to happen. And I talked to Brenda Jesus, and I listened online during the RDC and Department of Ag discussion with the grazing permits. What I'm asking for, Shanant, both BIA, Department of Ag, as well as RDC, is let's not just have a talking work session. We really have to have a work session where we put that pen to paper. And we really have to identify and create timelines in which, what each agency is going to be responsible for doing here in the next few months. All along the trail ride, I've heard many families, and there's a family up here at the summit where we stop, where an elder grandma mentioned that her, permit is still tied up in probate in the courts and waiting for it to be issued. And so those are concerns I heard all along the way, and we really need to, address that. And those 40 years, 50 years, waiting for this to happen, we really need to give people an answer. At this point in time that families have sort of given up and just, are doing their own and having their own, livestock and managing them the best way they can. And because it's something, in previous studies, I've learned that it's something that the net people, it really is, they're tied to their animals emotionally. And there's a real spiritual connection for them as well. So if if anyone is going to take the livestock away, you're going to cause a lot of, emotional, mental, spiritual harm to our people. And if you're going to take that away, what are you going to replace it with? Beta not so get the bebeja de not had the lay hamado hajet a dollar a co in the state a codo art sound a napic injurada a qua not loshi hashin so go ajot dollar a hamado hajet no jo hot on dantin o quadan in lego sani has twi a coho a de hajo but neils and dollar. I understand that our range management needs help. And so I've, along the way as we rode our horses and I've talked to people, one of my priorities for my area is the Tsitlajin Watershed Project. I really want to address watershed and land conservation. If there's a way that we can bank some of those waters and we can hold them back and slow the water down, it will really help our range. And what's out the nekeya, the haliao, yendahidol aslan so yen, sus case, lay the kea pakatna shao, lay de shamasan she ad narao, hashing so go adult to sound that desk and they are yenel anit out, what out not who your son or jog on low, what are yen, sus case, quitted out here.
Thank you, Vice Chair Simonson. Next, we have Vice Chair Casey Allen Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On page 13, the former Bennett Freeze area, my question is how many projects have been completed for livestock and wildlife and the development of water sources such as windmills and earth tanks. I reserve my time.
Reserve time of 4:38. Next, we have Honorable Shauna Antlaw.
Yeah, Shadeja, Madam Speaker, and then good morning to Mr. Sosi again. We have become familiar with one another, working together with RDC. However, I do have a question. It is concerning to me. I have been approached by my constituents in Chinle Agency, where they have been receiving letters from the Bureau regarding their tally count, and some of these letters have indicated that they will have to remove their livestock if they are in non-compliance. So I wanted to find out what part of the CFR do you have enforcement regulations? And then also, what is the due process for individuals that receive those letters? And then also, just how are you reporting that type of correspondence that is going out to the community members? So with that, I'll reserve the rest of my time. Thank you.
Reserve time of 3:55. Next, we have Honorable Riquinez.
Thank you. Madam Speaker Curley, honorable members of the 25th Navajo Nation Council, Aro Sitsila, Mr. Sosi, Superintendent Sosi, Akehe Kuro, BIA, Washington, Bada Anish, under the Department of Interior in Hinan Shidas, Enigido, Nahas Chinda Nason Are, Aroba Henson, Hot the neck Echihan Chico, Belt, Ninikala, and then Rene, East Agi, Elaine Hiltahal, Ladans, and Gibinina, Yobaliada, Et, and neck Echigo Yachiko, Soba Henson. On this report that we have right here, Tira, on page 34, sand and gravel, Bakar. The second bullet point, San Juan Sand and Gravel, LLC, San Juan Chapter Pit, pending approval of mining and reclamation plans, and recommendation of bond amount by BLM, and environment assessment, pending review, BLM contact information provided. We met June 5th on the phone call, and I raised some concerns because in the area where this gravel pit was being proposed, Mr. Sosi, I really would like for you guys to put a hold on this, because after this had been approved, it went through the legislation process back on the 23rd Council. That was way back then. Nothing has happened. Now, people moved back. They're concerned because they don't want noises coming from this gravel pit in wee hours of the night. So, so it's really difficult to move forward with this gravel pit because people live right there, right next to it, and I don't think it's a good idea. It would have been nice if it was done way back then, but right now it needs to be held off, or just from my understanding, having talked to some people, they told me that there was an expiration date on it. They should have been, they should have proceeded, but nothing happened on no. So if you would, Mr. Sosi, look into this and make sure that San Juan chapter did pass a resolution last month to go ahead and oppose this continuation of this gravel pit in San Juan chapter community. I'd like to reserve the rest of my time. Thank you.
Reserve time of 2:11. Superintendent Sosi, return the floor back to you for your responses.
Akia nana ayesa pakita nitsendo nita nek acho yatio yo jonia anotso nita donne chihuta on leda chumada shana shanis thaota le arende ek at basic chen sikhes as a broadband Ashik at beyond it the yos out I send Jonia Jot on Jono, Nal Kido Hal Kido da, Ito Nachi, Dens Edo Nachitahos, Ato, to Bande Credo, Bande Neshishi, and Jono got on at Abanda Whitne. Hala Hinat An, Ianda, Lashitans and do, O United Kido, and the Atlanta Atlete, or Yataltiot. Shinlo, but Kata Shale, not Annie. Tapagano Atlanta Atlenas Ojuk Asho Andalia Eben Nachiko Betratkanata Stahota I want to actually come back also to the previous set of questions from Nathan Honorable Nocha on uranium cleanup. I neglected to provide an answer there, but we have been working from the Bureau of Indian Affairs, working with U.S. EPA, as well as other entities on addressing those abandoned uranium mines. I think all of us are aware that there's over 500 abandoned uranium mines on the Navajo Nation. And that is a challenging legacy issue that we're working on. And the latest, thank you, the latest proposal that was provided by U.S. EPA was looking at the Corriva mine to through landfill hauling that might happen. So that's a proposal that's been recently provided to us, and also I think some of the communities in the affected area from Church Rock, Pinedale to Mariano Lake to Smith Lake to Thoreau. And that is, in a sense, yes, there's been conversations apparently at US EPA, but now that they're starting to look at the engineering cost analysis study, what they call ICA work that they're doing, they've identified a potential hauling route from a private former mine site, Corvera mine, to a private landfill site. Actually, it's, I think, owned by the county, but it's a private location in Thoreau, east of Thoreau. What they're proposing is that they want to look at the main hauling route they want to look at is I-40, using that route from Church Rock through. But that the secondary route, also as an emergency bypass, is what I'm understanding, would be through Church Rock, Pinedale, Mariano Lake to Smith Lake, and then back to Thoreau. They are looking at developing what they call a repository at the Thoreau landfill. So that's what they're working on. So we've been in conversations and discussion with US EPA. You asked a very, very good question on what's BIA's role. So from eastern side, because we know there's probably a lot of sites in eastern that must be addressed through the remediation work that's going on with US EPA. Even Department of Energy is also involved. So just to kind of step back a bit, Department of Energy is working on these sites, and what they're doing is they're doing reclamation work on certain sites. Reclamation is very different than remediation work. The remediation work is being done by US EPA and working with their PRPs, responsible parties, potential responsible parties, to address these issues. And we also know that there's been significant advocacy by tribal communities at Red Pond, as well as the NGO NDOW, I think is the name of the group that works on that. So those are the ones that have raised some significant concerns and issues around the hauling route. So BIA is involved in also looking at, and we've been in conversation and discussion with our solicitor's office. What does it mean on this new proposal? And what does BIA, to what extent can BIA be part of that process, and what part of the process would it be? So we've been having questions. Again, this is a kind of a newer proposal that's submitted to us, and I've relayed to our solicitor basically that when those roads were developed and when the rights of way were issued, that was really not for hauling contaminated soil there. And so that's one of the questions they're looking at from our solicitor side, as well as looking at those allotment lands along that route. What does it mean for those prior consent that was provided for those allotted lands where this hauling route would go? So we are in conversation with our lawyers on those issues. More generally, we've been having even more conversation with our folks internally. For example, there's discussions around Mariano Lake area and Church Rock to develop repository in those areas. And all this information is also related to Navajo Nation EPA. So they are also certainly a resource, and you could ask them to come in and provide a report on it. But one of the legal questions that we're trying to look at is if there's a repository built on, let's say, Mariano Lake area on allotment land, what does that mean? Who would, in the terms, those lands would become long-term encumbrance in having a repository. And all of those hauling routes to a repository also would need rights-of-ways. Those rights-of-ways would also require consent. As well as Navajo Nation, keep that in mind. During the land buyback, the Navajo Nation became significant owners in many of the allotments in Eastern Navajo Agency. In some cases, the Navajo Nation has majority ownership in those allotments. So we kind of treat the Navajo Nation as an allottee in those situations. Consent would still have to be secured from the Navajo Nation for those type of situations. So there's lots of ongoing conversations we're having, and we're trying to get clarification on what our role is going to be from the BIA side. But again, keep in mind also, U.S. EPA has provided guidance saying that under their CERCLA authority, they don't need to get permits, is one of the things that they mentioned. So I think the nation's leadership really needs to have a detailed conversation, discussions from the leadership perspective on how U.S. EPA is addressing these issues. What we're trying to do is at the ground level, looking at the land, allotment lands, and even to a certain extent, even on troubled trust land, we would have to approve rights-of-ways. So we're still involved in that area. So that's some of those things and what we're doing in terms of the AUM cleanup work that's happening. Your second point about July 28th, we'll certainly have one of our team members address or be at the meeting with NDOT and other counties. So we'll make that known to our team members. And I'm hoping they're also listening in on this conversation. The next one is from Honorable Delegate Helena Nez-Begay. You had 4 questions. You were saying there was about some, perhaps some home site leases related to, and how that might be related to RMUs and withdrawals. So I really, from the BIA side, the Navajo Nation has taken over all the home site leasing process. So it was really on the land department. I'm familiar when we had it, when we were issuing home site leases, it was 1 acre usually. But the range management unit, or I'm going to have to follow up on that with you. Okay, let me follow up and get clarification on that. Certainly we'll do that. But yeah, the second question was on cleanup of old buildings in Tonalina and Kaibito. This might also involve the old police academy, possibly. Or not. But nonetheless, we do know that across the Navajo Nation, there are concerns about old buildings and old things like that. And we'll continue to work on that, and we'll provide a written response on that piece, because there's different offices involved in the whole process of addressing those issues. I'll give you an example. In Crown Point side, in the Crown Point metro area, we have a lot of old federal buildings that are not being used. So we have to work with DFMC, we have to work with the Navajo region's property management and others. Usually funding is the challenging part. And then we also, in a sense, have to work with BIE because they were able to address dilapidated old school buildings. So we'll continue to work on those issues. I think we'll provide a written response on that one. Road maintenance, I think we talked a lot about that, and I tried to address many of the aspects of it. Water truck, we certainly will take your recommendation when they're blading it. Perhaps we can find a way to maybe not do it right when it's very dry, and maybe right after the rains, which we kind of do. We consider those things, but we'll take that into account. But I know that sometimes it's very difficult to secure a water tank truck to use out there, and we look to NDOT to help us with that, and we'll continue to do that from the BIA side. Grazing permits, we are, again, as I have stated earlier, we're continuing to work with the Department of Ag from the Navajo Nation, as well as other entities to address those issues. And again, we'll have that 2-day work session with RDC coming up, I'm assuming around August, late August is what we were looking at. Perhaps early September on that. So I'm sure MPL will be part of the discussion, as well as transfer. What's the process for transferring a grazing permit? Next one was from Honorable Chair Jesus. He talked about the grazing permit and checkerboard fee lands. Really just to let you know up front that BIA has no oversight on fee lands. We do not get involved at all on fee lands. So I think that more than likely, the Department of Ag will have to take the lead on that. However, we don't want to tell the Navajo Nation how to do those things. We can only show example and provide technical assistance, so we can do that. But it's really going to be the Navajo Nation's decision on how they look at not only ranching, but also those vacant fee lands, where people might want to use it for home site leases or for grazing. The second one you mentioned was on drought conditions and what resources might be available. Certainly USDA Farm Service is like one of the main sources for some type of funding. They have their own yearly criteria for applications, but normally they ask for like a permit to show proof that they do have these permittees have some management over those areas. We do work on those with the USDA. NRCS is also the other aspect we work with closely. So we'll continue to do that and work with them. BIA, unfortunately, we don't have any direct resource to fund any of those efforts. We do work hard on the conservation plan with permittees and things like that. In the eastern side, I know that Land Board and Navajo Nation officials are seriously looking at the Navajo escrow account. When we get to the point from BIA, when we transfer those funds back to the Navajo Nation. And my understanding is that the Navajo officials want to somehow use the fund management plan for supporting some of those proposals on the eastern side. That's my understanding. Probate was the third part of your question. Just to kind of put this in context, the BIA works closely with administrative judges in Albuquerque to probate trust asset resources. What does that mean? Well, what that means is if you have ownership or interest ownership on allotment land, that would be probated through the federal probate process, as well as IIM account funds that might still be there. Those would be probated through the federal process. And the families will have to initiate that with our office in Crown Point and others at the region also for only those trust resources. Now, on the other side, the Navajo Nation Tribal Court probates, all the personal realty type of property. Personal property, I think is what they call it. Those include, vehicles and even residential leases and things like that. The difference on the grazing permit, on Big Navajo, starting from District 15, grazing permits are probatable in tribal courts. So that adds a little bit of complications. Off reservation, on the eastern side, grazing permits are not probatable. So the permit terminates when the individual, the permittee, passes on. So then it really falls back on the landlord at that point on assessing the situation, advertising that ranch unit being available, and then comes towards our office with documents and things like that. So again, tribal probate does that part. And again, the family has to initiate that with the tribal court. That's how it works. The other probating happens at the county level if the family wants to do that. So there's different types of probates and different things that are probatable in those. So just some information on that. I think those are all the questions, Honorable Jesus, your questions that came through. Now on to Honorable Simpson's question. Gosh, you got lots of questions here. I feel like I'm in jeopardy or something. Yeah, let me take it. I got some. Thank you. I got it. The first question is on the BLM RMPA work. Just really quickly. So this whole work happened from BLM. They initiated the whole resource management plan. The original one was approved back in 2003 for BLM. And so what they realized since then was that there's lots of potential for even more oil and gas development and extraction activities. So internally they reviewed it and they said, gosh, we need to do an amendment to that resource management plan. So the current work that we're doing, the RMPA, is the amendment work that we're doing with BLM. But so when BLM decided to update and make an amendment to it, they started the process. But what turned out was that lots of tribal communities were being impacted. So back around 2018, the tribal representatives, as well as tribal members said, where's BIA? BIA should be part of this process. So we had many conversations with BLM leadership, and they said yes. So BIA became a co-lead on that project around 2018. So in 2018, we worked closely with the leadership and the BLM team on it. But your question, I think, Honorable Simpson, is about working with our leadership here on the Navajo Nation side. We had done some reach out to the president's office, and we all know that he's very busy. We'll continue to reach out on when he's available so we can update him on what the RMPA work is. Keep in mind, part of that RMPA work also involves the Section 106, which is to address historical properties that might be impacted. Under that work, there's an options that tribes can host also what they call do a programmatic agreement. And that's what happened in this situation. The tribes across, the ones that have what they call cultural affiliations, requested a programmatic agreement to be done, not the normal routine Section 106. The reason why they put out a programmatic agreement is usually to improve or enhance the tribal consultation process. And that's why this programmatic agreement was developed, and we're working on that with BLM. One of the things that came out of that I believe you're alluding to, Honorable Simpson, is that how other tribes might be part of the process in looking at historical property through this Section 106 or the programmatic agreement. We do understand your concern. I think BLM is very much aware of that concern that you have. And we'll have to have more discussions on that, Honorable Simpson, on that situation. We are required, of course, from the federal agency to be in compliance with NEPA as well as Section 106. We'll continue to do that. And those meetings where those happen, we will certainly continue to invite you to those meetings. You talked about also the second point about residential lease. There seems to be some delay possibly, and some are taking a little bit of time, and what might be the setback or the obstacle. Again, earlier I was mentioning that we are very much aware that ARPA-funded projects might be supporting those homes out there, whether it be home site lease areas or residential lease area. My team is very much aware on the eastern side, because that's where all the majority of allotments are. They are aware we're working hard when we get those applications in, and we address those issues as quickly as we can. It is true that there was some setbacks with the fish and wildlife, and I believe they might not be fully staffed. Possibly that's where some of those delay occurs. HPD, I think, has been very responsive, and I think they're fully staffed on that, so that's been really good. So if any place where discussions could happen is on the fish and wildlife side. Again, keep in mind that's a 630 contract from the BIA, so we'll have to work with our AOTR and others to address those concerns and delay that might be happening there. The next question you had was about why do folks in Eastern Navajo Agency pay grazing fees but not in Big Navajo? That's a very profound question, Honorable Simpson. If you look at 25 CFR 167, the Navajo regulations, there's a little provision placeholder in there on that about grazing fees or rental fees. You'll see in there it's a placeholder that the Navajo Nation's supposed to put some legislative action, whatever work that needs to be happened to put grazing fees there also, if that's what the nation chooses. But we are getting concerns from Eastern, questions around why do we pay on Eastern side but not in Big Navajo. Those questions are being asked. So I think your question is very much on point. But it's really, I believe, on the Navajo Nation to make a policy decision on if you're going to add grazing rental fees in that section. And then it would be across the board that the grazing rental fees would be paid across the nation. And keep in mind, I think what we found in Eastern as a model is that because people pay for grazing fees, there's certainly an ownership commitment to it. And they're very mindful of when they get a grazing permit and how they have to continue to take care of the range unit. Again, this is also to maintain land stewardships for future generations, and especially for those up and coming individuals or ranchers that want to take over those range areas. So I think your questions around that are very relevant, Honorable Delegate. The next question you have is on bonding. We will implement the bonding requirement. It is there right now, and we did inform the Navajo Nation right before the pandemic that we will be implementing the bonding requirement. And so, as you know, Honorable Delegate, we've been having some conversation, even through the pandemic, on how we could address the bonding requirement. And it really depends on the Navajo Nation. There is a waiver option to it, but I think we would recommend not to waive it, but to figure out a process and a procedure on how bonding could be done. Some ideas that I remember hearing was that perhaps the Navajo Nation, since it's a self-insured entity, could provide the insurance cover for that bonding requirement. But that process would have to be worked out with Department of Ag and how that could be implemented. But just be mindful that in 2025 we will be fully implementing that bonding requirement. The next one is it's kind of related to BLM on how other tribes might perhaps have some impacts on approval for rights-of-ways across Navajo lands. And certainly that, I'm sorry, let me take that back. So public domain lands and BLM areas. So that certainly is a consideration that we need to continue to have conversation with BLM on, because that's something that I think needs to be clarified and worked through. The next one is from Honorable Delegate Simonson. You were asking again about the. I really appreciate what you said, Honorable Delegate, about the penal so the net that the yol sosi yo ya hitansen to balchen da she ya panat yanata open yata no juno ta yata altile ko I say can juno go ta she really appreciate that what you said in Navajo, but I do know it is a sensitive area. I mentioned earlier that for MPL area, they're working through phase 1 and 2, and we're working with the Department of Ag on those sheep units, sheep units that needs to be worked through and talked through. Again, I think that at the grazing seminar or summit that we're going to have, certainly I think you'll be there to provide some guidance on that. I guess let me take a little bit of a moment here to say that we want to look at, from a policy perspective, how the land stewardship, land trust asset preservation, and how grazing could be balanced. And I hope we really look at that at the summit we're going to have on grazing, because we have to look at some tough questions. A lot of it, I think, is lying on the Navajo Nation. You are the landowner. How do you want the land to be sustained for 7 generations out there? We can't allow decisions except on science-based inventory studies, inventory work. There's got to be some ways to find that balance. I mentioned in one of our discussion with RDC, deferment might be a possibility. About 6 years ago, when I first came on board, I was talking with the permitting out in Theru, and that was also during the very significant impact from drought. And I went out to Theru, that range unit where this permittee had a range unit. I was amazed when we deferred, and he was able to fence it in, and he maintained that range. I was amazed at how much the forage came back. There was grass there in the watershed areas, in different areas of that range, despite the drought that was there. So there's a way to do it. We can balance the trust asset land preservation with grazing permits. We've got to look at that together going forward. And I'm really looking forward to Honorable Jesus's call for that 2-day work session that we're going to have. So that would be my response to Honorable Simonson. The next one was from Honorable Delegate Johnson on the former Bennett Freeze, what projects have been completed for wildlife and life. I'll have to get back with you on that one. I need to get more details, and the regional office will provide a written response on that to you. The last one or actually 2 more. The next one is on Delegate Ann Claw on the Chinle agency, where letters apparently went out suggesting removal of livestock. We would have to get back with you again on that piece. I'm not, again, I'm on the eastern side, so those letters did come out on the Big Navajo side, which is really from the Navajo region, and we'll have to work with our Natural Resources branch to talk about that. What I would say is this: we have to be very mindful of the sensitivity around that. On the eastern side, as an example, when we do a cancellation of permits, we just don't cancel it. We go through a significant process, also provided by regulations. There's a 30-day to show cause to cancel permit. So there's all these requirements that we have to go through. So really, I think in all, there's like 2 or 3 months of conversation, discussions, not only with the land board, but also with the permittee when we're going to try to cancel a permit. What we found there was interesting. When on an annual basis, we identify those individuals that had not paid their permit fees by the end of January, we sent these council, intent to cancel the permits. But many times, probably 90% of the folks come in, they pay their permits because they know that they don't want to lose that permit. So I think those types of conversations need to happen, even on the Big Navajo side, to address these issues and concerns that are there. What is the due process, appeals? I think just in general, what I would say is if you look at the CFR Part 2, that's a very good section to be familiar with, because that's a general appeals process that we have to adhere to from the federal government. So that's one place that you could look at the appeals process. It's very clear on that. Other than that, we do have their own, in each section and areas of work that we do for grazing, it has a process also identified in there that we can use. One thing to keep in mind though, back around, 2018 or 2019, the Navajo Nation Attorney General issued a dispute resolution process. So also keep that in mind. That's the process that we also recognize from the BIA. I'm going on and on. The next one here is from Honorable Delegate Naz. You were commenting about Nekachoyatki. I appreciate it. In general, thank you for that. You were talking about the sand and gravel. We certainly will make it known to RD Mahoja and the team to look at that issue again, to either pause it, stop it, or whatever that needs to happen. So we'll have to probably reach out to you to get further discussion with you on that piece. I think that's it, Honorable Speaker. Thank you.
Mr. Sosi, for your responses to all the colleagues' questions. At this time, I'd like to recognize Navajo Nation Gaming Enterprise, who sponsored our lunch today. So we do have Ophelia Bradley, Executive Director of Public Affairs on the south side. And colleagues, we were served Navajo beef hamburgers this afternoon. And thank you, Gaming Enterprises, for supporting our Navajo ranchers. And if you are on campus, if your families are on campus, we do have the same lunch provided across within the council tent, the hospitality tent, on the west side of the president's office. So if you do have relatives that are around, feel free to grab lunch for the same lunch that we were serving. Thank you, Gaming Enterprise. And we also have Shanto Vice President, Marcia Gray Eyes, who is also with us within the chambers. She's on the north side. Thank you for coming. Yate. Thank you. Colleagues, again, we'll continue with the response questions here. We do have Vice Chair Yazzie Nixon Q.
Thank you, Mr. Sosi, for answering our questions. I'm way over here in the back. So I know what you brought up was that it can, soil and also or vegetation can grow during the drought. And I think it really does go back to our soil. So everything that we eat, all our food has to be planted. Even the beef that came today, those animals had to eat the grass. And so it really is important that we take care of our soil first. And then I was reading your report that you did have a turnover in a soil scientist. So if you can let me know when you hire that person, I'd like to, I kind of geek out on soil a little bit. Also, thank you to the BIA for hiring a range land management specialist. I'd like to invite you and invite the range management specialist to meet with my grazing officials in my communities, and I represent Tisto, Dalcon, Indian Wells, Greasewood, and Whitecone. So the other thing is on page 8 in your report, it does say that, you know, we need to have active leadership in the natural resource management conservation efforts. And I'd like to know, what do you mean by that? What kind of help do you need from me? What are we not doing to be active leaders in this process? So one of the things I would also say is to include our spiritual leaders in this process. You know, we need to have traditional spiritual ecology a part of this. I think all of us need to participate in this process of, you know, grazing, our animals, our medicinal plants, our food, and even down to the health. We need to all be included in this process. Can you also let me know on page 9, the top paragraph, there's at the end, there's a possible meeting that you guys might have between Navajo Nation, NRCS, and BIA NRO. Can you let me know when that meeting takes place? I also read that BIA participates with participates in meetings with Southwest Vegetation Management Association, drought monitoring teams, the Tribal Drought Summit, and the Arizona Drought Interagency meetings. Where can I get a copy of these reports so I could read up on the data? And then again, thank you for the windmill and maintenance repairs for the Navajo partition lands. Lastly, I do need some more information from BIA's perspective to get a better understanding of the Chaco issue. Is there any way you could provide me history of the Chaco 10-mile buffer zone? You know, we can schedule a time to do that. Or if my colleagues want to know more, you know, I'd be open to having a bigger discussion with everybody. And the other thing is there was a Dear Tribal Leader letter, and it went, it was about, I guess in March, there was an Indigenous People Conservation Advisory Network. Who is a part of this, and how often are they meeting? I reserve my time. Thank you.
Reserve time of 1:18. Colleagues, I'm going to go back around to reserve time since I don't see anybody else in queue. We have, let me see. We'll come back around to Chair Charles Newton. And we do have Delegate Autoso with 3 minutes and 50 seconds. We had Chair Eugenia Charles Newton reserved her time of 4 minutes and 42 seconds. We'll go to Council Delegate Autoso with 3 minutes and 50 seconds.
Thank you very much. Mr. Sosi Kudo Dashinto Benan Sosi Bahadina. And I think that the recommendation is as you did allude to that the Bureau of Indian Affairs, we need something to be set up so that the Navajo ranchers understand. Because a lot of it, when the Bureau of Indian Affairs translate things such as land, tribal trust land, and then they'll say, oh, this is your customary use area. There's difference. And all of those definitions really need to be conveyed to the Navajo people and or to the direct permit holders. The other is that if you can, there's a Curly Valley irrigation project that was withdrawn for the Bureau of Indian Affairs, 1953, in Western Agency, Tuba City. if you can, get me a copy of that resolution. I know that there's a document I was floating around that I seen at the Tuba City Western Agency office, and and just to provide clarity to a certain issue. And if you can get that document for me, that would be very, very instrumental for me, because it will clarify a lot of things. But there's a Curly Valley irrigation project which was withdrawn by the Navajo Nation Council for the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Thank you very much. I'm going to reserve my time.
Reserve time of 1:55. Delegate Herman Daniels with 1 minute and 1 second.
Okay, thank you, Madam Speaker. Mr. Sosi, throughout the Navajo Nation, chapters, they have projects, but that in nature, of course, some of those projects requires BIA's approval. Of course, what has on the rate and the rate shot toward it. What has on the rate shot toward at Koyoshi, I don't let, but that in nature, like the hotel that I don't know, and the rate. Now, the Yamaha I don't hold Yako. So, couldn't need a skilliki, couldn't rate to have a meeting with Mr. Mahoja, with the Shanto chapter officials in Linigi, not Ani in Linigi, the sewer lagoon, to tap into the sewer lagoon. They need BIA's approval.
Time, Delegate Daniels. Next, we have Council Delegate Dr. Andy Nez with 4 minutes and 3 seconds.
Shada Speaker for addressing the questions. I think moving forward, just focusing on our respective agency with Fort Defiance and working on some of those areas there within our communities. But I do want to apprise the BIA Navajo Area Office that Title III amendments have been ongoing. Many of our respective district grazing officers have been meeting, so I look forward to learning more on how BIA Navajo Area Office can contribute to those discussions, because you hear a lot of concerns that come from our constituents as well as our grazing officials, farm board members, related to the additional components when it comes to BIA. Ako kwa eki ato sahot tatay to bahan eki so oyo sahot ako het di pepe has ani title 3 that is ninki e kwa eki journalist to listo that to casto les e what jehotesh atlinso. So just to apprise you of that, and I think that the superintendents can also encourage the BIA rep, Mr. Mahoja, to continue and to be present within the communities so that you get a deeper understanding of what my colleagues here are bringing forth to you this afternoon. Again, I think I'm a firm believer that the more we are in the community, the more we immerse ourselves on some of the challenges that our constituents face, the better we are understanding and advocating on that front. So I encourage yourself as well as Mr. Mahoja and the rest of the team to make time to do that across the Navajo Nation, in and around the Navajo Nation. So with that, Speaker, I do waive the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Nez, for those questions. Next, for reserve time, we do have Vice Chair Slater with 3 minutes and 23 seconds.
I have two more requests and then I'll shut up. Thank you for spending all this time with us. I had been in contact with Ms. Maples over at Navajo Nation EPA. She said that BIA has access or has some information on brownfield sites specifically related to sheep dips. And we're trying to develop a plan within the district on remediating those sites, maybe with some alternative methodologies like phytoremediation. but they're adjacent to areas that we need to redevelop for economic development. And in the absence of the funding, or with the funding that was line item vetoed in the last administration, we're trying to look at some other avenues. If you could assign a staff member to reach out to me to discuss this issue further, it'd be really helpful in trying to merge data that Navajo Regional Office has with data that Navajo Nation has with some that the community may have in each of my 5 chapters. Second, there was a diversion dam, reservoir, and irrigation project that was done, I think, early 80s in Round Rock to rehabilitate that and support our agricultural system there. And they're assigning ARPA Fiscal Recovery Fund dollars to examine different options for how to rehabilitate that system. And the Department of Water Resources indicated that they really don't have any data. They kind of assisted, but this project was done under the aegis of the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And so if you could assign some staff members to investigate that particular issue and get in contact with me, in addition to other BIA irrigation projects within my 5 chapters, because each of them are now developing plans for how we can rehabilitate and redevelop those projects. And I know Ms. Curley and other folks have my contact information and you can reach out to me. And Speaker, I'll waive the rest of my time. I don't need a response today, just things I want to follow up on. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Slater. Good afternoon, colleagues of the 25th Navajo Nation Council. I will be pro tem while the speaker is taking care of business for a second. So with that, we're going to go on to our next reserved time, which is Delegate Stephen Arvizo. Delegate Arvizo, you have 3 minutes and 1 second left.
Madam Pro Tem, thank you. Mr. Sosi, Dati Kudo. Earlier, and then on your report on page 20, our meeting at Smith Lake for the pine beetle issue, which earlier. That's still a big concern for the 3 chapters of Pinedale, Mariana Lake, and Smith Lake. We're pretty worried about it during the fireworks season, and thank God nothing happened of it. But I would like to continue those meetings and try to come up with some kind of solutions for all those dead pine trees. I thought bench tradition, so reserve my time, Pro Tem Speaker.
Thank you, Delegate Arvizo. You have reserved time at 2 minutes and 14 seconds. Next in queue, we have Delegate Nathan Nota with 2 minutes and 56 seconds. Delegate Nota.
Yate Nana, Pro Tem, and Mr. Sosi. I have one more request, and this came with a couple of text messages. The Biological Resource Compliance Form. They said the 2 text messages I got is it's incredibly complicated, and these people are saying they need some help in filling these forms out. And I got another from another individual that said the same thing, and I guess they're having issues and problems with several individuals. And I'm thinking that this new resource officer that you might have hired, or that you hired, maybe they can provide some services to help these people fill out these forms in addition to the conservation plans that you guys require. I think in a lot of cases, some of our clients or some of our constituents need help in those areas. Thank you. I'll reserve my time.
Thank you, Delegate Nota. You have reserved time at 1 minute and 54 seconds. Colleagues, we're going to give the time back over to Mr. Sosi. Mr. Sosi?
Thank you again, Honorable Pro Tem Speaker. Appreciate the conversation. I really do appreciate this opportunity from the Bureau of Indian Affairs aside on behalf of R.D. Mahoja to have this dialogue. I think that we will not always, we're never going to always agree on everything, but I think that we can have a very good, meaningful conversation on these issues. Despite the fact that we have limited resources, even in our roads department, we'll continue to be a partner with you to work on these issues and concerns. Certainly, we work closely with our staff to maintain, outstanding customer service, closing out project or communication issues that come about. So we'll continue to do that and be a partner to the Navajo Nation. Honorable Vice Chair Yazzie, you were talking about kind of a holistic approach to looking at the soil, the health of the soil. Certainly, you are on point, because the soil is the foundation of all things in basically animal life or plant life that's out there. So I think that's really an excellent point to say that taking care of the soil is important, and we'll certainly continue to be integrating those types of considerations. We do have some very, very good subject matter experts from the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and they are aware of a lot of these science-based considerations that they have to look at as they help us in looking at land use decisions, or also, and especially in grazing permits, the balance of the need for land preservation as well as protection of the different land assets there, including during the drought or during these type of situations. You mentioned on page 8, active leadership. You said related to conservation, what kind of help do we need to provide from the Navajo Nation side? I really appreciate that offer. I think that all of us, and depending on different areas of work that we do, we certainly look to the Navajo Nation for the policy direction on these areas. And I have to, again, relate to the outstanding leadership from Honorable Delegate Jesus, saying that let's come together on the grazing, let's have a seminar on it, let's have some key stakeholders there from Navajo leadership, as well as Navajo officials, as well as and others from the BIA, and really work on those policy types related questions. We'll come to the table with more program recommendations and the procedures that we use under the regulations. So I think these questions do cut across many policy areas that we have with the Navajo Nation and the work that we do. So part of that the active leadership question is really looking at that type of engagement, and what we'll do certainly is provide recommendations with our experts to help in the decision makings that you all would make. And so we'll continue to do that. I think that's part of what that notion about active leadership is really involving. You also mentioned that perhaps we need to extend some of the conversation with spiritual leaders, looking at the spiritual ecologies out there related to grazing, food, and overall health. So certainly we'll have, I think at that seminar that we're talking about, we'll be talking about a lot of those types of issues. I have to say, from a personal look, food is certainly important, and about 5 years ago I decided to plant some peaches and apple trees in a really semi-arid type of situation. Yes, it does require a lot of water, but looking at it from a more planned perspective, this year I think I'm going to have some nice peaches and apples, even on those higher mesas. So I know, I'm very familiar with working in the soil, putting your hands in the soil and getting dirty with that. So I do that at my home, and I appreciate the opportunity that I have for that. I'm very blessed with that, so I appreciate that. The second comment that you made was related to some of the association participation related to drought. We certainly can have one of the team members provide some of those reports. I believe it will come more from our natural resources area, to provide some of that, those reports with the Southwest Association that you mentioned there. On the Chaco issue, that again is a very complicated issue, and I would just recommend what we could do is from the Navajo regions direction, the Office of the Regional Director, to make those decisions, and how that could happen in terms of providing the education on that. On the deer tribal leader letter back in March 2023. You were mentioning who was a part of that. So I'll have to reach out to our staff on that and get back with you on a written response for that one. Then the next one went to Honorable Otto So. You were providing more of a comment, I believe, on what are maybe some enhancements or improved ways to reach out to ranchers so that they kind of understand what that grazing permit really entails, especially if it's on tribal trust land or other lands that we manage together from the BIA and the Navajo Nation. Also understanding customary land use areas. That is certainly, I think, a very challenging area for Big Navajo. On the eastern side, it's a little bit more easier, if I can say that, because we do have established range units. Usually those have fenced areas, and we have conservation plans approved for each of those range units. And I know our team members from the Natural Resources side at the region try very hard, and they're working hard to work with the communities out there. And again, it's not an easy work that they do, but I think that they're making some progress in working with communicating on those different requirements and how it is in these situations where there's customary land use areas. Honorable Delegate, so you also mentioned about the 1953 Curly Valley Irrigation Project. We'll certainly sort through our documents and see if we can get a copy of that, or find somebody that would have a copy of that and relay that to you, sir. Next one was some follow-up by Honorable Delegate Daniels on some of those chapter projects in the Shanto area related to development. And you're requesting RD to meet with the Shanto chapter, perhaps to provide a report out to sewer lagoon work. And we'll certainly let the RD know so he can put it on his schedule to go out there to provide some guidance, and perhaps with some of our subject matter experts to be in there too. Next one was also another follow-up with Delegate Naz. You were indicating in the Fort Defiance area on some of the Title III amendments, and you want to have some discussions on perhaps aligning or eliminating those differences in understanding on maybe Title III and federal regulations. We certainly can do that, and we'll talk. What we need a lot of times is just a request from any one of you. If you want a meeting with us, please do that so that we can bring in our subject matter experts. We can provide, or whatever reports that's out there, we'll bring those to the conversation and the table for discussions. So please submit an email to us, or a letter if you prefer, and then we'll put that on our calendar to go out to a meeting on the different areas. The next one, two more after this, is actually just a follow-up that we need to do with Honorable Delegate Slater, so we'll do that. The last two is Honorable Delegate Arvizo. You mentioned the pine beetle issue that is afflicting the ridge between Church Rock all the way to Smith Lake. We understand, and as you and I know, we met about 3 or 4 times now, and you want to know how do we continue that. So the status of that is that we were very fortunate to have our Navajo Region Fire Management team to be there. And what they're doing is they're completing their draft plan on it. So I'll loop back with them and figure out where it's at. And they did indicate once they complete the plan that they were willing to go back out to the chapters and provide guidance using that plan. But keep in mind, parts of the plans would entail looking at the different land status, as well as addressing those concerns and issues on not only the ridge itself, which might require any type of NEPA compliance documents, but at the local level is those 1 acre home site leases and residential leases. What is available, what options are available to help mitigate, perhaps a potential fire hazard. We have a really good team on that side from fire management, and we'll, like I said, I'll loop back with them and see where the plan is and how we can reach it back out to the communities out there. The last one that I have here is from Honorable Delegate Nota. It's more of a request on better understanding the biological resource compliance form. Certainly that form, as well as the the archaeological report and other documents are needed for some of these applications or different work that we do. My understanding was that since the Navajo Nation Fish and Wildlife has a 638 contract with us from the Bureau of Indian Affairs, they are obligated to provide the education on those different forms. So we'll probably have to reach back out to our AOTR to make sure that that concern is addressed in a lot of the engagement with the clients that are happening. So we'll do that from our side. And then he also mentioned about assisting with conservation plans. Certainly we'll continue to do that. On the Eastern Navajo Agency, I think we have over 700 approved conservation plans. That was not an easy task. That was over a span of about 10 years we were able to get that done. So I really appreciate my team, our natural resources team, and getting all those done working with the clients. I'm sure that that type of task is also before on the Big Navajo side. But those would be my response at this time, Pro Tem Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Sosi, for your responses. Do kune nasht na holjisto le kodo na til kidikishinana ko Chair Vince James, and then we can proceed back with reserve time.
I had done speakers and then members of the 25th Navajo Nation Council. Mr. Sosi, good morning. I'd like to ask of you, there is an overall budget that's provided to you from the federal level. When it comes to the Gala office, how much of that funding is going towards personnel costs, and then actually how much funding is going towards the operational costs for our Navajo people throughout the Navajo Nation? We all know that there is 14,167 miles of roadway within the Navajo Nation. 9,400 of that is earthen roads, 1,700 miles of paved roads, 179 bridges, and 5 airports. And Navajo Area BIA office owns 42% of those roads out of the 14,000 miles. What is your plan to move forward to address these road issues? Now, my next one is in regards to N15. We continue to have issues from Burnside to Greasewood. In reality, it is issues from Burnside all the way through into Loop, Arizona. That whole N15 route needs some major work done. What is the plan of Gallup office to address that need? Yesterday, I explained to President Nygren and Vice President Montoya that we do have $36 million sitting for N15 from Burnside to Greasewood. And as we continue to sit here, we've always had an issue with BIA responding and providing the documents that is needed to move forward with that project. And so where do you stand on that? My third question is the federal government has indicated to myself that BIA has identified some BIA routes. How did you identify those BIA bus routes for the whole 25th Navajo Nation Council delegates' regions? How did you identify those bus routes? Did you did you guys go out there and count the students? Did you guys work with the school district? All of a sudden, we are informed that there was so much funding that was given to BIA, and based off that, BIA had initially identified some bus routes. Nor myself have I received any notification of which BIA bus route have been identified to utilize those funds. Again, it has been a very interesting ride with BIA, and I hope you continue to work for the Navajo people, and we continue to find so many different reasons and excuses up to this point to provide those service that is needed for our Navajo Nation people, and I hope that you can somehow streamline majority of those burdens that are put in place by BIA and assist us and provide us some recommendation on how some of those burden process can be streamlined and how we can advocate on behalf of our Navajo people in Washington, D.C. Thank you, and I reserve the rest of my time, Speaker.
Reserve time of 1:26. We go back to reserve time. We have Chair Jesus with 2 minutes and 9 seconds.
Yate, thank you, Madam Speaker, and also colleagues of the 25th Navajo Nation Council. I'd just like to thank Mr. Sosi again for your responses. One question I have is regarding the business site leases that are still under the Bureau of Indian Affairs. I know that the Navajo Nation had enacted their own business site leasing regulations back in 2005 with amendments made in 2009. And to this day, the regional business development offices are still working with the 5 BIA agency offices for some of the business or entrepreneurs that continue to be under the directorship of the Bureau. Now, one question that I have is when Division of Economic Development is working with a default business site lease, oftentimes the Navajo Nation would have to take the lead because BIA didn't do their due processes. And I'm just wondering, maybe this is where we need to start a dialogue and a discussion with Navajo Nation Division of Economic Development to maybe just bring all the BIA business site leases across to the Navajo Nation. Because right now there's always oftentimes of communication that is an issue. And this would be another area that I really would want to start venturing with Division of Economic Development, as it always has been a concern with collaboration with the Navajo Nation Real Estate Department as well. That is item 1. And then item number 2 is in regards to water rights issue. You probably have heard and seen in the papers that the Navajo Nation is arguing for water rights for our Navajo Nation going forward indefinitely. So in regards to that, what are we doing as Navajo Nation? And the Bureau having that trust responsibility, how is the federal government through the Treaty of 1868 making plans with the Navajo Nation to possibly make some developments of reservoirs? I know that oftentimes we just see a lot of our tributary water flows that just go into the
Time, Chair Jesus. Colleagues, we're going down the line. We have reserved time for Vice Chair Johnson with 4 minutes and 38 seconds.
Thank you, Speaker. Superintendent Sosi, I see that on page 54, if my colleagues can take a look at that page. Earlier this year, we had some winter runoff, and this is the community of Bird Springs, and the bridge that is filled with debris, refrigerators, tires, silt, all that is built up. That bridge, I believe, is supposed to be almost close to 10 feet in height. If you take a look at that, it's almost clear to the top. And you see that excavator trying to clear out some debris. And if you look at the upper left picture, and you'll see that once that's all filled up, the water goes around and starts flooding out the roads, and there's not enough culverts to release some of that water. And just on the other side of that picture, there's a Hogan trailer of families. I'm pretty sure everybody in here has seen the individual that was disabled in a kayak. Her family had to carry them out, you know, across the Little Colorado River to safety. And that's very conserving safety, the lives, and also they had to evacuate their livestock. So BIA, you're the owners of this bridge. You know, there's all these concerns, you know, of the families in the area. And you know, they need the bridge debris cleaned out now. You know, the roadway repair needs to continue, and I understand that the ownership is BIA. And so monsoon's here, and I just got a text from one of the community members of Loop stating that, the family is afraid, that this hasn't been done yet. But I did receive an email earlier today that I believe one of the team from BIA is there trying to, get that digged out and get that cleaned up. But there needs to be more effort, in getting that cleared out. And I know that they're working on looking into a discussion plans of, some alternative solutions to this issue. So we need a better communication with the community from the BIA. And I know that NDOT was there to help out as well, and they're willing to support, BIA as well, and also Navajo County. So we'd like for you to go ahead and relay that to the department that is responsible for that area. So the concern here is the citizens of that community. From my understanding, the citizens that are in that area do not have a home site lease, but yet they get rendered the support, the emergency support from the local chapter. And that's, do we provide, a relocation, temporary relocation for them? That's something that we all need to sit down and talk to and see what we can come up with. And we would like you to be, part of that discussion as well. So, but right now I would like to, see that BIA route N71, the bridge cleaned out, all the debris, and also the road repair, because that's a main route, that goes to Winslow and all the students, the bus routes, the Winslow Indian Health Center, as well as a, just a local commute, to the grocery store, Walmart. So just would really like your assistance in that. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Johnson. Next in queue, for reserve time, we have Council Delegate Shauna Ann Claw with 3 minutes and 55 seconds.
Thank you again, Shadeja, Madam Speaker, and then Mr. Sosi again. So I did mention the letter of trespass regarding the grazing permit, so if I could get a response to that. In addition to that, as Madam Chair Jesus was talking, business sites is another one that is of my concern as far as Chinle Agency. I do have a few businesses that have the BIA leasing, and some of them have expired. So we do need assistance to get those leases reactivated and then updated as well. I know that our BDO is working with the BIA. However, the response time from BIA is very slow. So how can we improve the communication, and also how can we improve the process of how to work with our business site owners? In addition to that, Chinle was hit with the flood. During that time, BIA, I think, was out just very brief, but the response was minimum. And so going back to our trust responsibilities and what we have heard from my honorable colleagues here, how are we able to improve the communication between the Bureau, since you are overseeing the land there, and Canyon de Chelly is in the original treaty, so therefore your trust responsibility should be at its maximum level. And also thinking about that, with the roads and the improvement there, you do know that it's flooding on N7 right near Holiday Inn. So what is your plan as far as the flooding area on that particular road? In addition to that, Chinle does have the vendor village proposal in place. So with that flooding, that has been a concern for myself. I know that, I don't know if there have been any studies done on that area, but I think that BIA does need to step up to the plate to be more vocal in how we can better use the funding so that we're not contributing to a flood zone there. And then also what Madam Chair was talking about, building reservoirs for our Navajo Nation with the recent U.S. Supreme Court ruling. I think that it's very imperative that the Navajo Nation work with the BIA to create reservoirs within the community. So with Chinle being a prime example, and also in an annual and perennial runoffs, I think that would be important to start working with the local chapters to begin preparation so that they can continue to preserve their way of life as far as providing water for livestock, and then also for permit holders, and then also promoting education. So with that, I'll go ahead and reserve the rest of my time.
Reserve time of 40 seconds. Colleagues, we have a new colleague in the queue. We'll go over to Chair Shondine Parrish, 5 minutes.
Yeah, thank you, Speaker Curley, and good afternoon to my colleagues in the 25th Navajo Nation Council. Welcome, Mr. Sosi, again to the chambers. It's great dialogue this afternoon, and I just wanted to also ask for my district, the chapters of Chilchimbito, Danahotso, and Kayenta. Like many of the members of the 25th Navajo Nation Council, there's discussion about roads, and we really need to sit down and discuss culverts all across the Navajo Nation, the replacement of culverts, the clean out of culverts, and making sure that our roads are safe across the Navajo Nation. So I'm just going to put that request in now to meet with you and to meet with the staff as soon as possible to continue that dialogue. And Speaker, with the rest of my time, I'm going to ask if I could give that time to Chairwoman Brenda Jesus.
Yielding time of 4:10. Chair Jesus, do you accept?
Yes, I do, Madam Speaker.
Chair Jesus, you have 4 minutes and 10 seconds.
Hagwashi, Shadeja, Chair Parish, and Madam Speaker and colleagues of the 25th Council. So as I was saying, in regards to reservoirs, I think it is imperative, like my colleague did mention, Mr. Sosi, please, direct us back to the regional director, Mr. Mahoja. Only reason why he's saying that is because we need to redevelop our in aquifers and our sea aquifers, our groundwater, and just have some of that surface water. So it's again, being active on behalf of the Navajo Nation. So in hopes that we could replenish a lot of these, which would possibly, hopefully be staggered across the Navajo Nation. But if we can just start with one, that would be really great. The third question that I have is, I noticed that the Bureau on your report, page 38, the Bureau had awarded to Navajo Nation Fish and Wildlife to spend federal dollars in the amount of $6.7 million in regards to developing that agricultural resource management plan with the EIS. Now, this is one of the main documents that's currently hindering reissuing grazing permits on Big Navajo. I do not know if BIA has gotten a report from Fish and Wildlife or just where are they at. And if this is something that the Bureau needs assistance with, we are more than welcome to re-invite Fish and Wildlife to Resources and Development Committee in hopes that we could start moving with this initiative. So again, that would be one other question. And then the other one is in regards to the minor source regulations. I just wanted to alarm you and put this on your radar. The Navajo Nation EPA had came before Resources and Development Committee. There is going to be a minor source regulation that is going to hopefully be put in legislation, and have whoever the final authority is to approve that regulation so that Navajo Nation would be able to regulate these minor sources here on Navajo. So that's just one thing I wanted to share with you this afternoon, Mr. Sosi. And Madam Speaker, I do reserve the rest of my time. Reserve. I can't reserve it? Okay, do you want me to keep talking? Okay. And then, so Mr. Sosi, again, I humbly request, I do believe that we have listeners on the call here this afternoon. Grazing permits is a big issue. We know that it goes into, so it parallels with home site leases too, because we've got a lot of home site lease disputes that are also correlated to grazing permit holders. Because again, this is where that seminar or that conference or the summit that maybe the Navajo Nation and BIA can hold, so that there would be proper education adequately across the board, meaning we're talking about the land boards and the grazing officials, the farm boards, because right now somewhere with the system, with this home site leasing on Navajo Nation, grazing officials are not fulfilling their full due process. They're not going to the nearby grazing permit holder to get a consent. And then guess what? We start getting disputes on home site leases, and we have a lot across the Navajo Nation. So that is one area that eventually we can venture on and partner up together with Navajo Nation Land Department as well, and general land leasing or general land development department as well. So again, Mr. Sosi, I do humbly, thank you for sitting here on behalf of Mr. Mahoja and also Ms. Curley there. And again, this dialogue would be great because there is some vast concerns in regards to trust responsibility on behalf of the Bureau. And I will go ahead and just waive the rest of my time now, Speaker.
Thank you, Chair Jesus. Before we move forward, I'd like to recognize former Councilman Harold Wanika, who's sitting on the far in south side too as well. Ado Kune'anana, we have reserved time for Council Delegate Ricky Nez with 2 minutes and 11 seconds, waives his time. Next, we have Vice Chair Yazzie with 1 minute and 18 seconds.
Thank you again, everybody. Very good questions. And, so the theme that I'm hearing in all the questions today is the correlation between just erosions, roads, conservation, and climate crisis. And I think, it really is important that we all work together to figure out solutions. And so I do appreciate that I get to go back into this report later on, and I'll be bugging you. But one of the other things I want to ask is, I know in the report it does say that there's contracts that were given to Western and Eastern Navajo Agency on noxious weed projects. If there's any way I could connect with those individuals to get an understanding of how, what kind of solutions they're thinking of, how they're implementing this type of program in their communities, I'd like to get a better understanding of what they're doing. Thank you. I waive the rest of my time.
Vice Chair Yazzie waives the rest of her time. I'm going to go back to Chair Eugenia Charles Newton with 4 minutes and 42 seconds.
Thank you for that, Speaker. And also, Mr. Sosi, you've been on the hot seat for a few hours now, but we appreciate you being here answering the questions on behalf of Mr. Mahoja. I do have a specific question regarding the farms there in Shiprock. I know that Delegate Otto So did talk briefly about basically BIA's involvement, and my understanding is there's a moratorium on issuing out the farms with home site lease. So if I can get some, and I'll be sending an email to request a meeting to get a little bit more information on that, but also the farming area there in the Shiprock community is not being cared for. I did send an email asking if you guys could clear the roadways, especially since when farmers are getting ready to pull out, you can't see unless you pull out like almost completely onto the road, which defeats the purpose of trying to be safe by stopping and looking to see if there's anybody coming. So we do need that addressed. And I think that if it's not addressed by November, my husband and I will be out there cutting down trees to try to help to do that. And we'll be sending you guys the bill for that, for labor and everything else. So just an FYI, I'm giving you warning on the record here at council. The other thing is in terms of the BIA, picking up with some of the roads. I do have the roads in my area that also need to be addressed, and I know that you guys did send a report to me updating me on what needs to happen and what your plan is on addressing that, but I just want to put that on the record that our roads in the Shiprock community also need to be addressed as well, so as well as the Indian Village Road, which is a residential road. So if you can help assist with that. And the last thing, and I know I spoke to Mr. Mahoja yesterday on this, is Shiprock's still waiting for the 42 buildings to be demolished there in the Shiprock community. You guys have over $4 million that we advocated for to get you guys that funding to start the abatement and the demolition. But if we can start working on that to get it done, I know that the community right now is holding my feet to the fire because we advocated hard to get that money. And thankfully, Congress was gracious enough to give us those funds. Now we're just waiting on you guys to start the process. So I'll also be sending an email to that issue as well. So I reserve my time, Speaker, with time I have left.
Reserve time of 2:03. Colleagues, I'm going to return back the floor to Mr. Sosi for your responses.
I think we're on a nice roll here. But thank you for your patience as we provide some feedback on those very specific or technical questions that you have. Thank you very much. Starting with Honorable Delegate Vince James, you had some questions on the overall budget and personnel costs, operational costs, and how those are perhaps used as resources for providing services to the Navajo people. We'll certainly provide a written response on that. We do have our budget officer who works on the regional budget, and she'll probably work with R.D. Mahoja to provide a response on that. In general, though, what you would see is that, for example, at Eastern, we get funding for transportation, real estate, probate, and natural resources. So those funds that we get are very specific to address those areas, so we can't use it for other areas. For example, if some issue came up and we can't use, for example, realty funds for demolition purposes, because demolition is under the DFMC and working on demolishing old dilapidated buildings, so they have their own source of funding. So for the funds that go to realty, for example, we have staff working on residential leases to address those, or leasing, especially to allotment areas. So, but we'll respond to you on your question for that. You also mentioned the N15, there's some issues on it. I think in general, what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing from everyone is road concerns and issues and how we can maybe improve our communication to delegates on it. On the eastern side, I try very hard to include, I usually send an email back to those affected delegates on the work that we do. And I think in general, we can certainly use that process. And we'll remind our BOT teams, the supervisors and the engineers at the agency to do that and CC the regional office. So I think that way we know that communication is happening at the local level. And that's the process I use at Eastern Navajo Agency. But related to N15, we'll certainly use a similar approach to it. You said that there was about 36 million sitting in for the N15. Here's another, I think, part of something we have to reflect closely on, which is that transportation. About 5 years ago, right before the pandemic, the Navajo Nation Transportation appealed directly to federal highways to get funding to funnel towards Navajo Nation transportation. Before that, BIA used to get the funds directly. So after the formal request letter from then President Begay, it was basically approved that the funds would go through the Federal Highways Administration. So NDOT is now the key entity that receives that fund. When that happened, there was lots of discussion on the different aspects of transportation, including road maintenance. So all the new construction activities went to NDOT. BIA no longer does that. All the planning funds for new construction went to NDOT. So now NDOT has that responsibility. There was some residual funding that BIA receives for road maintenance, but that's only to maintain that current road. We cannot improve those roads. Improvement means it falls towards the new construction area. And that includes getting rights of way, consent, and all the planning activity has to go with that. So in general, across the board for all the honorable delegates here, that's kind of the general guide that we should all look at and use. So if there's any specific question, for example, bridge clean out, that's a road maintenance. We would do that piece. But if we're going to improve that road near the bridge or on the bridge, that's new construction that would have to happen. That's improving the road. So that's what my general response would be on that question. And that relates to some of the data that you were providing to us on 14,000 miles of roads and 9,400 of the earthen roads and things like that. What's your plan, BIA? Well, the plan is that under this new understanding agreement, NDOT really has a significant role to do that. BIA, we can continue to address road maintenance. And what we do under that is, for example, we work with NDOT for winter, what we do the winter plan, where we address if there's a storm, how do we look at that? Another guidepost to that is when we look at the inventory system for the roads across the Navajo Nation, yes, there are BIA roads in there identified. There's also tribal roads that are on there. So those BIA roads, we have basically first responsibility to address them. And in areas sometimes we need help. So we reach out to NDOT to help us with those BIA roads, which includes bus routes. So there's some questions around bus routes too. What we're finding though is that we try to reach out to schools to provide their bus routes, and that's very challenging. So if somebody from the Navajo Nation side or even council to help us across the nation on providing bus routes to the BIA, we can certainly work on our system, the maps that we have, our inventory system to align that so that we do support those bus routes that are identified from the schools as well as that's in the system that we have. You were saying, how did you guys establish these bus routes? Gosh, road is a legacy situation. It has a long history. So if you go back even 10, 15 years ago, these roads, many of them were developed by BIA because those were commerce roads or school route roads, and that it was out of necessity that these roads had to be developed and built. And so it evolved from that type of evolution for these road development. Then as it became more very specific to NEPA compliance or funding resources, all those have been basically integrated into how we manage those roads. So it does have a long history. And on the bus routes, usually We work with those local schools to try to identify where the bus routes are. Another effort happened when the nation took over the majority of the responsibility was that the chapters met with NDOT, and NDOT looked at all the develop and looked at the maps where those roads are. So part of it was looking at the bus routes when they did that. And so the chapters had, working with NDOT agreed to 15 miles of road maintenance responsibility for each chapter. Then that sometimes was coinciding with BIA bus routes. So we still have to coordinate and work on all those bus routes together in that way. The next one, Honorable Chair Jesus, you were talking about business site leases under BIA, and then there seems to be some discussions that need to be had with Division of Economic Development. In general, when the Navajo Nation took over what was given the authority and authorization for leasing, which also included businesses, there were several processes that would have had to happen during that period. Some didn't happen, for whatever reason. Many of these leases should have been reissued under the Navajo Nation, but some didn't happen. So, for example, on home site leases, what we're seeing now is that even though the Navajo Nation issues home site leases now, the old home site leases that were issued by BIA, we're being told from the nation that BIA has to reissue or modify those leases. So there's continued discussions around that.
Point of order raised by Chair James.
I apologize on Superintendent Sosi. Speaker, if I can ask from us on it, Honorable Amber Kinazbak Pradi and Chiche, Honorable Carl Slater, to keep your conversation, sidebar conversation as low as possible. If we can keep the floor rules in order, Speaker, thank you.
Chair James, colleagues, as a reminder, and in the gallery as well, please keep your site conversations at a minimal, just giving that respect to our presenters and our colleagues. Thank you, Chair James. Mr. Sosi, you can continue your responses.
Thank you, Speaker. But yeah, so that's what we're coming up across in terms of leasing. So I think we're still having online discussions with the Navajo Nation Land Department and some of the leasing offices on those issues. We'll continue to work with them. So I think that certainly a conversation, maybe from a policy perspective, could happen. Maybe RDC could convene a topic of discussion on that business leasing side. Then Land Department, others can be invited to provide their updates. In terms of water rights issue, what is the Navajo Nation doing, and what is the BIA? How is BIA making plans to help develop reservoirs? Waters are floating off the Navajo Nation. Certainly, that is the reality of the situation, and I think that this is again a policy question, a direction that the nation really needs to look at and help us. I think that we do have safety of dams that get involved in the formal dam inventory. I'm not cussing at the inventory. Just kidding. But just the inventory of dams across the Navajo Nation. And that also involves any new dams. I think the process for that, what it entails to do that. Even some of the maintenance issues around earthen dams that are out there. So certainly we're available with our safety of dams, to have that conversation in light of the decisions that have been made recently, as well as Navajo Nation Water Resources to be there. Honorable Johnson, you were talking about the bridge debris and things. I will certainly work with our team and remind them that, see if they can schedule some maintenance work to go out there for that BIA road and the bridge work that has to happen there. We understand your concern there. Honorable Claw, you were indicating about the trespass letter. You would like to get a response on that. We'll certainly reach out to our natural resources to develop a response on your concern. You also mentioned business leases, so I kind of talked about that already. Flood, I think that certainly it's certainly nothing to laugh at when there's flooding that impacts our tribal community members out there. I do have to say that our team did go out there, and I don't know the details of how long they were out there, but we'll remind our team members that, where we can help, we'll continue to provide that support, and we'll let them know. I think our transportation team was also out there to assist with some of the road works that were impacted too. And as well as some of the flooding that you're seeing around Holiday Inn and 7, we'll have our team look at that. On all these road concerns that we're taking notes on them. And what we'll do is we'll reach out to the agency engineers and have them provide a response on all these issues so we can provide a good response to the council, which also includes the vendor village. There's a flooding area there. And then the question about reservoir, I addressed that. And we'll work with our safety of dams to get the technical guidance and to look at that. Honorable Chair Parrish, you also mentioned that the need for looking at culverts, cleanouts for safe roads. We need to address that. Again, we'll reach out to our agency engineers on that and see if they can schedule some of those. At Eastern, we do have kind of a rolling schedule. We look at cattle guard cleanouts. We look at fencing. We look at mowing is another one that we do. So that's kind of a rolling schedule that we have at the agency level. I know on the Big Navajo agency side, they also do that, but we'll remind them on it and possibly to better communicate with delegates in those areas on that work that they do. Again, Honorable Chair Jesus, I mentioned the reservoir, and certainly we'll let R.D. Mahoja know to be part of that discussion and to help from our side, from the BIA, to lead that conversation. You did mention on page 38, the Fish and Wildlife got $6.7 million to develop our resource management plan. We really do need the Navajo Nation to work on that plan. We will be there as technical assistant and advisors on it, because this resource management plan looks at various areas of natural resource work as well as land use decision work. For example, Alamo chapter did a wonderful job on developing a resource management plan in Eastern. So we look at that as a reference document from the Navajo Nation Alamo chapter to give us guidance on where business development might happen or where grazing is allowed and things like that. So I urge that the council work with Fish and Wildlife to get an update on that and what are the next steps on it. If BI needs to help, we're there to help provide that guidance and any regulatory guidance that might be available for that. But yes, we need to address that as soon as possible because it does hinder decision-making related to permits, possibly leasing and other development. That needs to happen. Right now, if we don't have it, it gets a little tricky and we have to make some decisions and continue to move forward on that. You also mentioned, actually just more of information to us on monitor source that Navajo Nation EPA will be regulating that. Grazing permits, again, we're looking forward to that summit and we'll certainly be there. Again, like I said, we're preparing for that summit. All our team members at the agencies have been informed already, and we're looking at innovative ways to address some of the challenges that we have on the grazing administration. The last one, one more after that. Honorable Delegate Yazzie, you were talking about erosion, roads, conservation, and climate crisis. We need to continue to work on that together, and we certainly, from BIA, yes, we need to continue to do that. We're committed to help you. You mentioned some noxious weed projects. I have to say, this is another area that's very challenging across the Navajo Nation. As we all know, there's weeds here and there. Noxious species, including feral horses. Those are noxious species that are out there. And it's not easy to address it because you could use mechanical methods or chemical treatment methods to address those. I have to also recognize and appreciate the Navajo Nation offices that helped us develop the weeds plan that was basically completed, especially working with RDC and other committee members, committees to address that. So that is a guide that we're using for the overall Navajo Nation, including Eastern, to address noxious weeds. What happened out of that, and even at Eastern, we were able, unfortunately, to work with the Navajo region's natural resources to get noxious weed funding. So we applied for that. We got some funds for that. Right now, we're doing some noxious weed projects out at Alamo and Tojule, and we did some really good work in the Rio Perco wash near the Lupton to Church Rock area. So we addressed some of those tamaris and other noxious species that were there. And so again, funding was very limited, but we did our best to do what we need to do to address noxious weeds. The last one, Honorable Delegate Charles Newton, we understand about your road concern, and we'll certainly integrate that into communicating with our shiprock engineer to provide communication to you and updates on it. Hopefully we don't get a bill, so we'll work hard on that. The project to demolish those buildings, gosh, I want to say it's towards the latter phase of getting the contract in place. So look out for some updates on that. So hopefully by the end of the year we'll see some good progress on that. Okay. We'll also do a written response on that question. But that's basically all the questions that I have on my notes. Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Sosi, for your responses. And at this time, we will go back to reserve time. We do have, I'm checking to see if they're here. We have Delegate So with 1 minute and 55 seconds. We have Delegate Arviso, who has 2 minutes and 14 seconds. Delegate, we'll go next to you, Delegate Nota, with 1 minute and 54 seconds.
Madam Speaker, I waive my time.
Thank you, Delegate Nota, for waiving that time. Next, we have Delegate Shauna Antlaw with 40 seconds.
Mr. Sosi, another concern that I have is regarding the relinquishment of the administrative lands near the old BIA maintenance area. So if I can get some assistance with that. I know they are broken up into parcels. We did get a temporary permit to use one of the parcels when they were doing the N27 so that NECA could go in there. So I do want relinquishment. Also, I do need to work with you to claim a part of that area as a historical area and maybe get one of the buildings to restoration status. So that's what I wanted to say as well. Thank you.
Honorable Claw for those questions. Next on reserve time, we have Chair Eugenia Charles Newton with 2 minutes and 3 seconds.
Thank you, Speaker. Mr. Sosi, earlier you mentioned the demolition funds that are needed for some of the projects. I know during the 24th Navajo Nation Council, we did ask for all of the facilities that are under BIA so that we could start advocating to get funds into your pot so that you guys can start working on abatement and demolition. To date, we haven't received that. So in terms of the Navajo that have to address the...
Thank you. Chair Charles Newton waives her time. Next, we have Chair Vince James with 1 minute and 26 seconds.
Thank you, speakers and then members of the council. Presenter Superintendent Sosi, thank you for the response in regards to the questions. I also like to mention to you that what is the plan on mowing your routes? We do have a lot of weeds that have gotten tall along BIA routes. What is the plan to mow those weeds down? Another one is in regards to the Russian olives. What are the plans of BIA to move forward to cutting those Russian olives or the salt cedar down the wash? We continue to have issues, and we continue to have water issues, and there was a great outpour of assistance that was provided in Ganado through the Pueblo Wash, and I appreciate that, and it just came to a halt and a stop. So what is the plan to continue off where you guys completed? And then my last one is we've been trying to also invite BIA to our chapter meetings to provide a report and to hear the concerns of the local individuals. If you can work with your staff to accommodate us in that way, I'll greatly appreciate it. And I also like to lastly say and give a big thanks to Ms. Curley for always assisting and providing us updated information and across the board of the BIA office.
Thank you, Chair Vince James. I'm going to go back around to reserve time. We have Delegate Arvizo with 2 minutes and 14 seconds.
Madam Speaker, thank you. Aro 25th Navajo Nation Council Mr. Sosi, I just want to thank you for coming out today, and also want to thank you for being a part of our Eastern Land Commission on Hananta, and I appreciate that. I just want to say that. Madam Speaker, I waive the rest of my time.
Delegate Arvizo. Thank you, colleagues, for your questions, and we'll return the floor back over to Mr. Superintendent Sosi for your responses.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. The first one I have here is from Honorable Claw on the concern for admin lines, relinquishing that, and perhaps saving some historical assets out there. Certainly, we know that I think some concerns of this came up before, and I think we had some at least preliminary work that's been done. So we'll see if we can sit back down with you and give you an update on that, and we'll give you a written report on it too from our side. You had some questions. Oh, I'm sorry, that's from your side. But then Honorable Charles Newton, you had some question on demolition funds, on demolishing and abating some of those old BIA facilities. You're wanting a list of buildings. We certainly can do that. We'll see if we can coordinate across the whole Navajo region from our side to see if we can put that together. Just as an example, to let you know, I think even in Eastern Navajo Agency, we have about 30 old federal buildings that needs to be abated. So we did also provide responses to some congressional inquiry on it. So I'm glad that that conversation is happening, and certainly your area is going to be probably the first one that really addresses that using federal funds. So thank you for your advocacy and the work that you do that does support, together what we need to do out there. But we'll see, we'll work on giving you a list, and we'll certainly respond from our region on that. Next one is Honorable Vince James. You said, what's the plan on mowing on routes? So a lot of the decision on the work on mowing, on fence repair, cattle guard cleaning is really situated at the local engineer level for the BIA office. And depending on, of course, their ongoing work, they might have to work on other things, but certainly that's they can schedule it at their discretion. And we'll remind them that we'll need to have those weeds mowed, especially now with the summertime. A lot of those weeds have fully grown now, and they're blocking, the views and things like that create a safety issue. So we'll remind them on that, as well as just also communicating with the local delegates on updating you on the work that they do. Sometimes they might have to have flagging out there to ensure safety as our team members are working on these different projects out there. The Russian olives and the salt cedar concerns that are out there, that's one of the areas of work that was covered under the weed plan that we developed recently with the Navajo Nation. So now it's really a matter of using that plan to seek funding internally with our central office and get funding to do that work. I don't think anything prevents the nation from trying to get other funds, grant funds or something like that, to help with the noxious weed work that has to happen. Yes, there's lots of noxious weed. Even some of the questions that came up while we were working on that was, even when road construction happens by IHS or something, and then the weeds come back quickly, those areas that were affected. Road right-of-ways, you have weeds in those. So those are all the different, I think, aspects of how we can address in a comprehensive way, and that's why this weed plan was very important to develop, and we developed that working with the Navajo Nation. So now it's a matter of getting the resources to do it, and we'll certainly relay that to the right office in the natural resources to continue to be vigilant in working on that. The other one that you mentioned about invitation to chapters, that is certainly very, very important. At Eastern, I do that. I attend as many as I can, given my schedule, to especially the Crown Point chapter, because they're more of an agency chapter. A lot of people come from the 31 chapters to come to Crown Point for commerce and other support services that they need. So I always try to make time to be available, and I go and attend those. I'm starting to go back out to the chapters, like even out way out there, like Herfinale or Torreon. We're starting to do that. So thank you for the recommendation. It's certainly true. Being out there, you get very familiar with the issues. You get from, as you hear me talk about a lot of these, that's where my learning comes from. That's where my engagement with tribal communities really come from. And this way I'm better equipped to provide good answers to you all when you have those questions. So we'll certainly take your recommendation. And that's basically it. I think I answered all your questions. Thank you. Madam Pro Tem Speaker.
Thank you, Superintendent, for your responses. Colleagues, for all your questions and comments for our presenter here today. We only have one reserved time by Council Delegate Otto with 1 minute and 55 seconds. So I haven't seen him enter the chambers. Colleagues, there's not anybody else in queue. Oh, we have Delegate Crotty. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Shadeja, Speaker Curley. Appreciate your report, Mr. Sosi. I wanted to ask, in terms of this report to the council, it's added as an oral report, and I appreciate the written report from the staff. Could you give me insight on, or if you could start reporting how many delegates you meet with quarterly? It appears that a lot of these questions could be answered in individual meetings. And so I just want to extend my appreciation to your staff, whether we contact the staff through email or via text, that we've received the type of response that we need. And maybe that could be a good practice to provide to other delegates on how to contact your office directly. So that individual questions could be answered. But I appreciate your report, and for your fire crews that are out there, your hot shots. We did recognize our staff here, and so we know that the hot shots are also putting their lives on the line to save not only our natural resources, but it's putting them in danger. So we want to continue to make sure that your hotshots and your team out there providing direct service and administrative service, it's helpful. Thank you, and I'll waive the rest of my time.
Thank you, Delegate Crotty, for your questions. Council Delegate Otto, you have reserved time of 1 minute and 55 seconds.